Okay. I would like to call the recommending meeting to order August 3rd, 9 a.m. The first line item of business, are we in compliance with the open meeting law?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So I'll move down, Councilman, if you don't mind, we're going to take a couple items out of order in order to maximize our meeting here today. So I'm going to take, with the councilman's permission, item number 4, which is bill number 2010-32, which levies assessment for special improvement district number 1513 via Olivero Avenue and Valdez Street, sponsored by staff.
Yes, committee members, this is a routine assessment ordinance for the SID. It's all in order. We have SID staff here if you have any questions, but we recommend approval.
Okay. If there's anyone wishing to speak on this item, please come forward and state your name for the record. Seeing none, Councilman?
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Bill number 2010-33 adopts the most recent version of the Local Government Records Program Manual and Minimum Records Retention Schedule for local government in Nevada and repeals Las Vegas Municipal Code 2.52.040 relating to the minutes of city boards and commissions proposed by Beverly K. Bridges, City Clerk. Staff?
Yes, committee members, this is a routine update. Every so often the state readopts its records program manual and records retention schedule for local governments, and so we are conforming our ordinance to their most recent adoptions. We also have an ancient obsolete provision that's been in the code for many years about the minutes of city boards and commissions that has been superseded by state law, and so we're repealing that provision.
Okay.
Recommend approval.
We appreciate that. If there's anyone here wishing to speak on this item, please come forward, state your name for the record. Seeing none, staff? Councilman?
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so moved. Also, I would like to let everyone know that bills that are moved out of this committee today will be eligible for adoption at the August 18th City Council meeting, for the record. Now we'll move to abeyance item, bill number 2010-31, which updates the regulation governing certain commercial entertainment and solicitation activities within the pedestrian mall, proposed by Bradford R. Jervik, City Attorney, and Councilman Gary Reese. Brad, I'd like to hear from you.
Thank you, members of the committee. Councilman Marlowe, Councilman Anthony, Bradford Richard, City Attorney's Office. I prepared a PowerPoint that will help walk you through several things this morning that will explain 4 things. The first part is dedicated to the history of the Fremont Street experience, which I think is necessary to understand how we got where we're at. The next portion is devoted to the history of the litigation. The next portion is devoted to the reason for regulations of the pedestrian mall. And the last portion is devoted to bill number 2010-31, the new ordinance that's before you that proposes to impose those regulations. So with that, let me start with the history of the Fremont Street experience. The Fremont Street experience was conceived in the early 1990s as a way to draw people to the alien downtown gambling area. A number of proposals were heard before the Fremont Street Experience project was a project that was decided upon. It was a project called Las Vegas that was dug out the street, canals and boats. It was other projects that involved building a replica of the Starship Enterprise that would have elevator ramps going down to the hotel casinos. Ultimately, the Fremont Street Experience, designed by the Journey Corporation, was selected as the project. The street was permanently closed to vehicular traffic in 1994, and construction began that year. And the Fremont Street Experience opened a year later in 1995. It's a cooperative venture owned and operated by a group of downtown hotel companies with ongoing involvement in the city of Las Vegas, and I'll get into that in a moment. If you have any questions, by the way, as I go through this, please feel free to stop me and ask. The original Fremont Street Experience as conceived was the Fremont Street Experience canopy, which then did not have lights under it. It had sky floats under it. These were floats that zipped up and down the line, up and down the street, and were based in the parking garage where they were operated and maintained. It always included the removal of the streets and sidewalks to be replaced by pedestrian wall. The construction of the parking garage and the Fremont Street Experience was also contemplated between 4th and Las Vegas Boulevard. I just want to point out that before the project, the sidewalks had always been open to speech, but the former street itself had only been used for vehicular traffic. In order to make this deal happen, the original four-party agreement was drafted in October of 1993 between four entities: the City of Las Vegas, the City of Las Vegas Redevelopment Agency, the Fremont Street Experience Limited Liability Company, and the Fremont Street Experience Parking Garage Limited Liability Company. So this is, when I refer to the four-party agreement, these are the four parties that are involved. And let me just state, the Fremont Street Experience Limited Liability Company has the same members as the Fremont Street Experience Parking Garage Limited Liability Company. One is in charge of the garage, the other in charge of the experience and the operation and management of the experience.
It's like that today?
That's correct.
Okay.
Still to this day, same entities exist. There may be some slight tweaking of the individual members of the LLC. So as you're aware, a number of the hotel casinos sold. Some members may have dropped in or dropped out. I think they've added members as opposed to lost members. But nevertheless, it's essentially the same group that's existed since 1993. In September of 1995, the four-party agreement was amended and restated to reflect the final version of the Fremont Street Experience of the parking garage. Some things happened in those 2 years. One, the project evolved from just a pedestrian mall with this the Sky Parade to the pedestrian mall with the light show. There was no longer a need to house the parade in the parking garage, so it became just a parking garage. A number of things, though, came up during the course of the construction that needed to be addressed. One was the parking garage sat on a site that was largely controlled by the city, but a number of parcels had to be condemned and acquired by the city. We estimated the amount of money that would be necessary to acquire those parcels on about $6.4 million, knowing it could well go over 6.4. The question became what would happen if it did. So the amended agreement also memorialized the fact that the Fremont Street Experience Parking Garage LLC would pick up the cost of any overruns on the acquisition costs of the land for the parking garage. So memorialize the final project with the light show, memorialize who is responsible for the acquisition of the property overruns. Again, Fremont Street is responsible now for the operation and maintenance of the Fremont Street Experience, including, but not limited to, the operation and maintenance of the pedestrian wall and operation and maintenance of the canopy and light show. When I say canopy and light show, until a few years ago, that canopy wasn't LEDs, it was light bulbs. And every light bulb needed changing from time to time. And the electricity cost was enormous. The Fremont Street Experience LLC was responsible for operation and maintenance of that canopy, and the canopy as exists today with the LEDs, responsible for the electric bill, responsible for programming the computers that generate the show, responsible for maintenance of the wall, for the watering of the trees, for cleaning up every stick of gum that somebody spits out on the wall. All operation and maintenance is 100% Fremont Street Experience LLC. The Fremont Street Experience Parking Garage is responsible for repaying taxpayers for cost overruns and acquiring the property for the parking garage. That comes out of the net retail proceeds from the retail on the first floor of that parking garage, which today consists of Walgreens, Tennessee's, and Mickey Fence. That net retail proceeds comes to the City of Las Vegas until we get paid back all the overage costs. So we have a direct financial interest in the success of the parking garage itself. Fremont Street Experience LLC derives all its profits from commercial use of the pedestrian mall to offset the cost of operation and maintenance, including the leasing of retail space in the mall, special events, and any other commercial use permitted by the development agreement, which means that all the things I just discussed that Fremont Street pays for, the electricity, light show, the maintenance of the canopy, the computer programming and the like, they fund out of pocket that portion which isn't raised by retail profits from the mall. That is largely the sale of the kiosks, the rental of the kiosks in the mall. That is any leftover money from the net retail after we're paid back. That is any other money they raise from special events like closing the street for New Year's Eve and things like that. How was the pedestrian mall funded? This is also important to understand. There were four main sources of revenue that built the Fremont Street Experience. The first was a room tax bond. The hotels on Fremont Street agreed to have imposed on them an additional 2% tax on rooms, and those hotels just a block or two off of Fremont agreed to a 1% additional tax on rooms. That allowed accountants and the like to look at a revenue stream that would produce, and they could estimate what kind of bond you could issue based on that revenue stream. That generated a bond of approximately $20 million. It was in the $18, $22 million range, but it generated a bond of that much, a 20-year bond. Again, the payment of that bond falls on the taxpayers unless the room tax is sufficient. So success of the rooms, room revenue, is critical to paying back that bond issue. The tax increment bond is funded by the tax increment generated by the redevelopment agency, which back then wasn't terribly much. So we maximized the bond to get every ounce of tax increment financing we could get out of it. And it was, again, about an $18, $20 million bond. That bond is pretty good today because the tax increment in the redevelopment area has gone up instead of down. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to address it, but that's how the tax increment bond works. There was a contribution from the Fremont Street Experience. That is, the member entities of the LLC contributed money to, when the change was made, to upgrade from floats to a light show. There were additional costs involved. That was all absorbed by the Fremont Street Experience. In addition, they were in for another $10 to $15 million of their own money to make the project work. And the final thing, and this becomes important because of just the bad publicity and misconceptions that occurred as a result of it, there was a $6 million grant from the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. It was a one-time grant. For the first 6 years of the project, LVCVA gave $1 million a year. That's long expired. For the first 6 years of the project, beginning in '95, $6 million a year was given to the project, $1 million a year. Who owns the pedestrian mall? Before the pedestrian mall was constructed, as I said, it was sidewalk and street. Street is called right-of-way. Streets are things that are owned by the city for a particular purpose, in this case, right-of-way, vehicular traffic. We cannot sell streets, we cannot sell sidewalks. The method that cities get rid of those things is called vacation. So when you see on the afternoon agendas of the city council to vacate a street or vacate a sidewalk or a portion thereof, that's how we give things back. It says we don't need them anymore, and by operation of law, the underlying interest reverts back to the adjoining property owner. So Councilman Anthony, if you and I have a house across the street from each other, and there's a street down the middle of it, and it's decided that the street is no longer needed, and it's vacated, I will now own everything from the front of my property line to the center line of the street, and you will on your side as well. That's how it works when you vacate your interest in something. Again, you could not sell the street to the Fremont Street Experience. We could not give it to the Fremont Street Experience. We can only vacate it or try and convert it. Here's the problem. Unlike most places in the city of Las Vegas where you own the dirt under your house and it would go to the center line of the road if we vacated the street, the hotels downtown are not built on parcels they own. For the most part, every hotel downtown is built on leased parcels, and in some cases, multiple leased parcels. And I think at the time we did this project, there were 95 some parcels. I could be off on the number, but it was right in that area. And as a result, if the street were vacated, the ownership interest would not go to the hotels to the center line. It would go to the leaseholders that had the property that they leased their property from to the center line, which would mean you would have to assemble about 80, 90 people that have no interest in running hotel casinos, but just leasing their property to try and make the Fremont Street Experience pedestrian wall happen. And that practically was absolutely impossible. So vacating the street was not an option. But what we ended up with was whether or not we could actually build a pedestrian wall on the former street. And we worried that if we used it for something other than vehicular traffic, it would be a de facto vacation, which would mean it would revert back anyway because you treated it like it wasn't a street anymore. Because you weren't using it as a street, it ended up in the hands of the leaseholders that leased the property of the casinos. We went to the Nevada legislature and we had the law changed. NRS 268.812 subsection 5 now allows the city of Las Vegas to convert right-of-way into pedestrian mall without losing the ownership or the control of the property underneath. So the answer to the question, who owns the pedestrian mall, is the city of Las Vegas owns the dirt under the mall and the surface of the mall, but the improvements to the top of the mall, the canopy and everything, were built and paid for by the Fremont Street Experience. Another myth that has existed over the years, off and on, is that the Fremont Street Experience was funded using park money, or in some way is a park, or works like a park. Let me destroy this myth once and for all. The Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority is allowed to exist under Nevada Law 244A.599. If you look up that section of Nevada law, you will see it doesn't say Convention and Visitors Authorities. It says County Fair and Recreation Boards. The Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority is a fancy name they picked for a county fair and recreation board. That's what they're organized under. And county fair and recreation boards have the authority to do certain things and fund certain things. And there's a list in NRS 244A of those things that they can
I
fund.
hate to interrupt you, but I think we just lost the recording. Would you give me a minute? I'm sorry.
No problem. What's the problem?
You're on a roll, too.
As long as they say, don't let us.
This probably sounds very familiar to you, but it's been an hour and a half on this and you're off.
You have to go back
If you want
to,
to shoot me right now, you don't understand.
you have to go back to minute 3.
Exactly where did we drop out? If that is the case, I am.
Excellent rehearsal.
Can you determine where you lost your recording?
Do we know what started?
Right at the beginning. We're going to move to a B. I'm serious. She said that this thing hasn't started. I can't listen to you twice.
I can't think of one. Go in the crowd.
That means you'll be doing it next time. What's that? That means you'll be doing it next time. I don't think so. You think she has something to say?
I'll make sure I'm operational.
For the ones left.
Draft one. I haven't seen the agenda. Not Desert Shores. I saw the draft for the Sun City. Oh, I thought you meant tonight. Okay.
Sorry,
No,
Councilman.
you good.
It's 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, maybe we could ask them to communicate. And also make sure that people who were previously on, who previously on conditions and stuff. Especially when it is, making sure that position is subject to conditions. We said not to do Asian contract.
Really?
I just want to make sure it's all.
Yeah, if you would, we're exactly on the same page. On this. This is just
And I just want to make sure we're back.
We're back. And where did we leave off?
Top of this,
On top of the next one?
yeah. top
So we
of it.
finished with ownership of the mall.
Right there.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
It's not too bad. Move back a couple sentences. Let me know when you're ready.
Ready? I'm sorry, for the record, we had a glitch in the recording. We're back on the record, and so I'm going to just repeat the last few sentences of this slide. The next question is, the Fremont Street Experience funded using park money, or is it a park? There was a misstatement made years ago that led to this myth that the Fremont Street Experience is either a park or was funded with park money, and I would like to destroy that myth today once and for all. First, it's important to understand that the $6 million grant that came from the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority was a one-time grant, but it's also important to understand how they're able to make that grant. Under what authority do they have to make a $6 million grant to the Fremont Street Experience?
Hold on,
The
Brett.
LBCBA, the LBCBA is created and organized under NRS 244A.599, which doesn't say anything about convention and visitors authorities. What it does is it gives counties the authority to form county fair and recreation boards. So the LBCBA is really a county fair and recreation board. And county fair and recreation boards have their own restrictions and their own limitations as to what they can do. There's a list in the Nevada Revised Statutes that says if you have one of these boards, you can fund certain things. One of them is recreational facilities, one of them is fairgrounds, one of them is parks, and there's a whole laundry list. We were concerned whether or not the LBCBA, as a county fair and recreation board, could fund a pedestrian mall under the Nevada Revised Statutes. To make it abundantly clear that it was perfectly permissible for them to fund it, we asked that the Nevada Revised Statutes be changed so NRS 268.816 subsection 3 was amended in 1993 to make it clear that a pedestrian mall is a recreational facility, not a park, a recreational facility eligible for funding under NRS 244A.599. No park money was ever used to construct the Fremont Street Experience, nor has Fremont Street Experience ever been a park. After the four-party agreements were executed that said who's going to manage the experience, how the experience is going to be built, what the experience is going to be, what the sources of funding are, who's going to be responsible for the overruns and property acquisition, it was also important to enact a couple of ordinances that deal with conduct and the mall itself. In 1993, the city adopted the very first ordinance regarding the pedestrian mall, the first pedestrian mall ordinance, which established the Fremont Street Experience pedestrian mall, set its initial boundaries, set the trajectory with the perimeters of the mall were, and charged the FSC LLC with managing and operating the pedestrian mall. It also prohibited a number of things in the mall. It prohibited parades, bicycles, unicycles, skateboarding, things of that nature. It also prohibited solicitation. At the same time this ordinance was adopted, or I should say within a few months of it, the city enacted a new solicitation ordinance to reflect new law across the country with respect to how you could regulate solicitation. So in January of 1995, the city adopts ordinance number 3862, creating new definitions of solicitation and coercion, and limiting the places a person can solicit, and prohibiting solicitation within the pedestrian law. Let me stop there for a moment. There's a definition in this section of the law as to what solicitation is. Then there's a complete prohibition citywide, not just within the Fremont Street Experience, that prohibits coercive or aggressive solicitation. That has never been disturbed. The coercive solicitation hasn't. The courts have had problems, as we'll discuss in a moment, with the definition of solicitation itself and whether or not it was content neutral and had all the qualities that the Ninth Circuit wanted to see. But coercive solicitation, generally speaking, across the country, cities that have banned coercive or aggressive solicitation have been upheld over and over again. The other thing in this ordinance that has been upheld over and over again across the country are bans on places people can solicit. A number of cities have adopted an ordinance that prohibits solicitation within 20 feet of an automatic teller machine. Those have been upheld because you're a captive audience at an automatic teller machine. The money's coming out, well, the person asking you for money is standing right there. Within 10 or 20 feet of the entrance to a business, the city picked 10 feet, but there are cities that have gone even more than 10 feet from the entrance to a business, cannot solicit, upheld over and over and over again. Anywhere within a public transportation facility or on a public transportation device like a bus or a commuter train. Again, captive audience. That's been upheld over and over again across the land. Anywhere in a public parking garage. We looked at those laws and those cities adopted their history and put those laws on our books. And we added one more thing. And we thought we made a record that would sustain it. We added a complete ban on solicitation within the pedestrian mall. Let's talk about the Fremont Street Experience as it exists today, and we'll get to the litigation in a moment. Currently, the pedestrian mall is a major tourist attraction in the downtown area, and it occupies the westernmost 5 blocks of Fremont Street. I should stop right here and add that it has been added to since it was originally conceived. There were cul-de-sac bulbs on 1st Street and 3rd Street on both ends. The Fremont Street experience has been expanded, so 3rd Street now goes all the way to Ogden, and 1st Street went all the way to the street immediately to the south. Those cul-de-sac bulbs, we went well past those. The main attraction is the canopy itself. More than $12 million LED lamps illuminate the overhead canopy. The primary focus is to create an environment of entertainment, retail, and outdoor dining opportunities. It's also home to the Neon Museum, which displays historic signs, which is another addition to the mall since it was built. The other thing that has happened since the mall was built is you've seen a Starbucks aside the Golden Nugget, so there's outdoor dining there at that location. Down in the block that is the formerly known as Indianapolis block, there are outdoor dining experiences there at Hennessy's, Mickey Finn's, and at the former Jovian's location. You also see kiosks up and down the street, which we're going to talk about in a moment as well. That's pretty much the Fremont Street experience as it is today. The same 4-party agreement is in place. It's been amended several times. Same financial relationship. The conclusion is this was originally conceived as a privately operated and managed public attraction. Although built on publicly owned land, that's how it was conceived. The revenue derived from the commercial operation of the mall would be used to operate the light show and maintain the pedestrian mall, and no taxpayer money would ever be used to operate and maintain the Fremont Street experience. Our money was the upfront money on the bond issues, which still haven't been paid. The downstream benefit was we'd never put another dime into maintaining Fremont Street or the experience again. Litigation, inevitable. ACLU versus City of Las Vegas, case number 9701419 began in 1997. The first lawsuit filed by the ACLU alleged that the solicitation and pedestrian mall ordinances were unconstitutional because they prohibited solicitation, leafleting, unauthorized vending, and the authorized erection of tables and structures in the mall. Let me stop for a moment. I'm using the word leafleting today. As it appeared in the original ordinance, it didn't say leafleting. It said the handing out of materials to passerbys, or words to that effect. When I use the word leafleting, I'm referring to that language. So I don't want somebody to correct me later in the record and say that that was an inappropriate use of the term. I'm aware that I'm substituting the word leafleting for it. That's exactly what handing out papers to passerbys is. It's leafleting or handbilling. Federal District Court upheld the solicitation ban and tabling ban. That's the local federal district court here in Las Vegas. But enjoined the enforcement of the leafleting and vending restrictions. Each side appealed the decision, but the Ninth Circuit dismissed these appeals. We stop there for a moment and say that in the original ordinance, the city carved out an exception for labor activities. We felt that while the Constitution gave you X amount of protection, the National Labor Relations Act gave unions even more protection. And we felt that in the original ordinance, we recognized that additional protection that the National Labor Relations Act gave unions to handbill, picket, or things of that nature, and we made an exception for them. The local district court did not like that exception, felt that we couldn't legally do that. We had to opt out of that. So they ruled in favor of the ACLU on that issue, and on the tabling, in favor of the city on the other issue. The federal district court granted summary judgment for the city in 2001 with regard to the solicitation and tabling ordinances, and summary judgment for the ACLU with regard to leafleting and vending ordinances. The ACLU challenged the constitutionality of the provisions of the pedestrian law relating to prohibitions involving free speech. Federal District Court of Nevada upholds most of the provisions of the ordinance, pretty much like the summary judgment motions back and forth, but now we're into the merits of the case. Summary judgment is when a court says there are no issues of material fact. We don't need to have a hearing, and based on what's in the record right now, I'm able to make a decision as to who's right or who's wrong. Everybody tried to appeal that to the Ninth Circuit. They didn't want to hear the appeals from the summary judgment. They wanted the final ruling from the court. So the court in 2001 upholds most of the provisions of the ordinance, but most importantly made a finding that the Fremont Street experience was not a public forum. That finding was later going to be overturned by the Ninth Circuit. I'll get into that in a moment. But when you make a finding that an area is not a traditional public forum, all you need is a rational relationship between what you're trying to accomplish and what your goal is and what the problem is. It's a very low standard, very different standard than we're about to get into in a moment. And he felt that under that standard, the city of Las Vegas met the test for the most part in the original ordinance, didn't meet the test when it came to tabling in this labor exemption that we had carved out. The ACLU then appealed that decision to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Ninth Circuit, in that appeal, determined that the pedestrian mall should be classified as a traditional public forum for the purposes of First Amendment analysis. Evaluating the ordinances under the more demanding standard in a traditional public forum, the Ninth Circuit upheld the injunction against leafleting and vending and remanded the case. So the ACLU on the two issues that we appealed on was upheld by the court. On the two issues they appealed us on, we were overruled by the court and sent back to the district court, who said, District Court, you got it wrong. It's a traditional public forum. You have to apply the more demanding test to see if these restrictions still pass constitutional muster. The Ninth Circuit recognized that all the ordinances, at that time anyway, including the vending restriction, were content-neutral time, place, and manner restrictions. Back again in district court. The court reanalyzed the solicitation and tabling ordinances and held the solicitation ban as a valid content-neutral time, place, and manner restriction, even under the more strict public forum analysis. Under that analysis, you have to have a substantial interest as a government in the regulations. You have to leave alternative channels for communication open when you use these time, place, and manner restrictions. And they felt, at least the local district court felt, that we have. Additionally, the court granted summary judgment for the ACLU on its claim on the table. Again, the slaver stuff is still in there. They won on that on the tabling portion. Back again, third time to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and this time the Ninth Circuit overturned everything that the city of Las Vegas had done and validated all the prohibitions in the pedestrian mall ordinance against solicitation, leafleting, tabling, and vending in the pedestrian mall. With the ordinance pretty much gutted and out the window, the city adopted new legislation. The city felt at the time that we were complying, and we still feel that we complied with the Ninth Circuit decision. The city eliminated the ban on leafleting found in the municipal code at section 11.68.100 subsection 1, and removed the exception for labor-related activities, the section I mentioned that we carved out for labor. We removed that from the code. The city also adjusted the definition of solicitation, we felt, to comply with the language of the Ninth Circuit decision, and the ACLU filed a challenge to the new pedestrian mall ordinance. Back again in federal district court, locally, federal district judge granted summary judgment in March 2009. The result was the definition of solicitation was declared unconstitutional. Even though it had been adjusted, the new judge felt that there were still some problems. The prohibitions against mall vending, advertising, and entertainment were declared unconstitutional. The prohibition against the erection of tables and other structures was declared unconstitutional. And the prohibition against solicitation was declared unconstitutional. So both the definition of solicitation and the prohibition against solicitation in the mall, both unconstitutional. That's where we're at today. Since then, there have been some discussions as to what the judge's order means. There have been some agreements as to how the Fremont Street Experience Security will enforce the law, or in the pedestrian mall, given the judge's decision in 2009. I can tell you, as counsel for the city, there's nothing in the judge's order that says the city can't adopt new ordinances. That's what we're here to discuss today. Before we get to the new ordinance, to discuss why are regulations necessary in the pedestrian mall. No regulation means there will be no viable commercial opportunity in the mall for the commercial activity that's out there, specifically the rental of kiosks and other space in the pedestrian mall. As I mentioned before, as originally conceived, the pedestrian mall was a commercial entertainment complex. The Fremont Street Experience LLC has the ability to not only control the mall, operate the mall, and maintain the mall. They have the opportunity to rent portions of the mall and use portions of the mall for the commercial benefit of the Fremont Street Experience, which has a collateral benefit to the city of Las Vegas. That commercial revenue derived from those kiosks and the sale from those kiosks on Fremont Street and from any other retail sales from the closing of Fremont Street on New Year's Eve to the New Year's Eve party, and any other event that they may charge money for, to the money they pay for bands to attract more people downtown that fill more rooms and help pay the room tax box. We benefit collaterally from the retail that exists on Fremont Street. And those commercial opportunities are severely disrupted as a result of no regulation, and I'll get into the case for that in a moment. Unregulated speech also competes with the primary purpose of the mall. This wasn't built to be a soapbox. This was built to be a place where people could come and enjoy the light show at night, which runs about every hour after the sun sets. For the stage shows, there are 2 stages on 1st Street and 3rd Street where they have live performances on a regular basis. For special events, there are car rallies down there. I went to an antique car show down there a couple of months ago. When NASCAR's here, they do events relating to it. There are probably a plethora of special events, including New Year's Eve, that Mr. Victor, the president of Fremont Street Experience, is in charge of staging. We'll talk about that in a moment. The retail kiosks and outdoor cafes that I mentioned earlier. Those are all disrupted and hampered without regulation in the mall, and we'll see how in a moment. Let me go to the first video. Now, before we play this, Betsy Kidder is, Betsy Fella is my legal assistant who is going to run the video here, and I know she'll be really patient with me. I want to state a couple of things before we go to these. These are snippets of larger videos, and if anyone wants to see the full videos, I can have access to them anytime if the ACLU wants copies. I'm glad to run you copies of everything. These are the relevant portions I wanted you to see so you know what's going on the wall. One of the things I want to qualify before playing these videos, many of these have got content that is of a religious nature. In other words, this is an anti-abortion protest. There will be a pro-Jesus protest, for want of a better term. I'm not playing these for the content of the video. It doesn't matter what these people in these videos are talking about. So when we see the content, I don't want you to consider the content. I want you to consider several things I'm about to point out. The amount of space they take up, the type of mechanism they use to deliver their message, in other words, amplification systems, the type of structures they bring with them to the mall, and the amount of pedestrian traffic that they interfere with in the mall, and what happens to the flow of pedestrian traffic, to the use of the retail kiosks, and the traditional use of the mall while these activities are underway. Betsy, will you play the first video, please?
I can't fix me. Not enough margaritas.
This occurred earlier, late in 2009, or last summer 2009. You'll see these structures. This is a loudspeaker in the middle of the structures. These are metal structures, metal pipes bolted together with foam board in between. You can see they're 20, 30 feet long, all bolted together, and probably 8 to 10 feet deep. They are in front of all of the businesses between 3rd Street and 4th Street on the north side of the street, and adjoining the kiosk, again using a loudspeaker system.
And Las Vegas stole my father from me. Las Vegas, the saloon, the booze, the pizza were
This is the gentleman on the loudspeaker.
Las Vegas stole my dad from me. How many other fathers have been stolen?
You can see the people around the signs are largely people associated with putting up the signs. You don't see tourist traffic, you don't see people walking by it, you see them walking on the outskirts of it. Let's go to the next video.
I can't fix me.
Oops, sorry, I gotta do this. But you got it. This is the next video. These are the kiosks around the same display you just saw with the audio system. Play the video. You'll look at these kiosks and you'll notice there is not a pedestrian or a tourist around any of them. And in fact, you won't even see the vendors themselves around their own kiosks. While this activity was taking place in the mall, the kiosks adjoining the activity were essentially vacant and almost abandoned with their merchandise just sitting there. Mr. Victor, who was present for most of this, who saw these videos, will also authenticate them and verify what I put on the record. Next video, mall entertainment. I guess entertainment is in the eyes of the beholder, and there will be some argument that some of this entertainment is protected by First Amendment speech or some such thing. We beg to differ, and I would like to play you a couple of examples of the type of entertainment that has been occurring unfettered in the Fremont Street Experience pedestrian wall. This is Mr. Animation. You can see Mr. Animation sets up in the wall. He is in an intersection. This looks like, this is 3rd Street. Circle of people around him, many, many people deep. Nobody's walking through the middle of the wall now because of the crowd that he's attracted. Mr. Animation is out here for purely commercial purposes. At the end of the video, you're going to see him step off the stage. This individual to the right has got a handful of cash. Mr. Animation is going to grab a large black bag, and he's going to walk around with this black bag while people put money in. Unfortunately, the video that we played for you today has been cut a little short. If it continues on for another couple of minutes and the full video will be entered into the record, you'll see they're also selling his DVDs. Again, this is not activity that was authorized by the Fremont Street Experience or programmed by the Fremont Street Experience. It's kind of an ad hoc thing that happens downtown. Next video. Well, that looked a lot. Let me go back. Let me see if I can do this. Let's try it again. This again is another group that came downtown. Just ad hoc. Set up tables, amplification systems, microphones, set up a choir. Again, don't pay any attention to the content. Pay attention to the conduct. The conduct, again, taking up an enormous portion of the pedestrian wall around the chaos and the light. You see a few people watching from the outskirts, no tourists, no activity going on within the area that this group has taken for themselves for their expressive comment. Again, look at the size of the tables and the fact that they have the amplification. And again, outdoor cafe tables, completely abandoned. Nobody's sitting there.
Brad, I just noticed something in this video. If you can just go back, can you rewind that a little bit? Or it goes back to the beginning?
Replay?
Yeah, replay. If you notice the gentleman in the left-hand corner, in just a moment, he's looked like, yeah, about right there. Looks like he's handing something out. Hold on. It's right after this. As a tourist was passing by. It's coming out. Here it comes. Right there, the gentleman in the yellow shirt.
Yeah.
Right there.
I don't know who he's associated with or what he's doing, but we'll talk about hand-building and leafleting in a moment. That is not the activity, oddly enough, I want you to take away from this. I want you to take mainly the size, the enormous amount of space that they occupy, and the inconsistency of this activity with the kind of activity this mall was designed to promote, which is commercial entertainment activity.
Commercial.
Is this the next one?
No.
Okay. Again, now we're going to see what happens at night. Another group. Play the video. I want you to notice this looks like a portafone. It looks like a megaphone. He's got it hanging around his shoulder. This is at night. You can see the lights are out. The light show is about to begin, or shortly has just ended. He is out with the megaphone, walking around the mall, getting people with. Here's another individual. I don't know what kind of expressive conduct he's entering into here, but he's apparently having some very lively conversation with the tourists at the side. You can see when the lights go dark and the show begins, the amplification system doesn't stop. Neither does the activity. This is completely inconsistent with the whole purpose of having a light show and sound show that goes with the light show. Next video. This is another group of individuals that were downtown for Gay Pride about a year ago. Go ahead and play this. What you're going to see, this is near 4th Street. 4th Street is one of the two areas, as you're aware, that vehicular traffic crosses the pedestrian wall. Their expressive activity attracts a crowd. That you'll see the first part of the video is kind of poor, but as the camera goes down, you're going to see that this expressive activity has essentially created a plug on the 4th Street end of the Fremont Street Experience to the point where people are standing in the street, can't get into the pedestrian wall. In a moment, you're going to see as the video pans to the right, you're going to see the gates that close the street for the parade are still open. The street is still open to vehicular traffic. And as a result of the conduct that you're seeing out here, forget the content, really the conduct, you have individuals standing in the middle of a traveled street. You guys got the streets completely open. Once again, at night, another individual. Literally, it appears, Betsy? Literally appears standing on his milk crate down his soapbox in the middle of the 1st Street intersection at night, again, an amplification system. What are the people doing? Nobody is going through this intersection or coming anywhere near this guy. Again, activity completely inconsistent with pedestrian law. Next video. Oh, sorry. That's me. This is Mr. we call him Robot Man, but he is another freelance performer that shows up ad hoc on Fremont Street, sets up in various locations. We've had individuals complain to us that this is a public area open to this kind of expressive activity, and even made the argument that this is First Amendment protected expressive activity. Let's see what Mr. Robot Man has to say about that. Tourists are taking this video camera. We'll see some pictures in a moment. Again, amplification systems to the right. He's being videotaped. He's telling them, you can't film me, you can't film me, you get out of here. This is an individual that a lot of people might think is associated with the Fremont Street Experience. They might think he's a freelance performer, regardless of what they think. This is a guy who supposedly is entertaining. He jumps off his platform, tells them not to videotape him, and scares them away. This, again, completely inconsistent with the reason this pedestrian wall was created. Kind of conduct from freelance performers that is not conducive to commercial entertainment activity within the mall. Next video. Back again at night on Fremont Street. You'll notice once again, individual with this particular group, taunting tourists, signs that you'll see when we pan back in this video and the next one, pretty much line this particular intersection, which is a thoroughfare for pedestrian traffic. You'll see people staying away from this entire area while they're there. Again, at night, with a megaphone, walking around. Again, pay no attention to the content, pay attention to the conduct. One more. It's getting a little redundant now, and I'll do one more for you on this one. Go ahead. Again, created for a light show, sound show, retail experiences, and here's somebody with an amplification system. Not just speaking speech. We'll talk about that separately later. The amplification system and the conduct is what I want you to see. Okay, that's the end of the videos. There is one more video that we were unable to have transformed into the PowerPoint. It is a video that you're going to see pictures of in a moment. When I get to the pictures, I'll describe the video for you. Again, it involves entertainers on Fremont Street. Let's go to a couple of things that are in this ordinance. The new ordinance, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, has got a prohibition against three things outright anywhere in the mall. Amplification systems, prohibition against throwing things into the mall. It says throwing missiles or objects over into the mall. And a complete prohibition against hula hoops. which I've been asked, why hula hoops? This is why. These are just pictures. An individual showed up with an entrepreneurial spirit thinking that he would rent oversized hula hoops to individuals to use in the pedestrian wall. As you can see, this isn't the 4 or 5 foot Hasbro hula hoop that you would probably have as a kid that you might have used. These are rather large hula hoops. The size of them can be seen as they sit in the pedestrian wall. The next several slides will show how big these things are, how much space they take up. Again, we're not looking at the expressive speech or anything, we're looking at the conduct itself and the consequences on the primary use of the wall. Here's a picture of another entertainer in the wall. I don't know what his name is, but as you can see, this fellow sets up orange traffic cones. Huge circle in the pedestrian wall. Blocks it out for himself. Does some kind of performance. Has right next to him a bucket for money. So this is not, he's trying to raise some funds here. And this is his collection that he has with him in the bucket, as you can see in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. This is Mr. Robot Man again. Why don't you show this, because it wasn't visible in the original video. Right at his feet, it's a bucket with the dollar sign on it. He's doing this for cash. Once again, Mr. Robot Man, slightly different location, his bucket. Once again, slightly different location, his bucket. And his amplification system. This is the video that we couldn't, unfortunately, get teed up, but I will introduce into the record before the council. You can find it on YouTube if you go to Thriller Downtown-Las Vegas. It's a couple of guys dressed up as members of the rock band Kiss. The Fremont Street Experience runs a number of light and sound shows. One of them is a tribute to the rock band Queen. One of them is a tribute to the rock band Kiss. So 2 entrepreneurial fellows decided that they would dress up as members of the rock band Kiss with pretty good makeup and costumes, come downtown and see if they could get their pictures taken with tourists for $20. When tourists were asked, I don't know who paid or who didn't, but this particular individual did not.
Brad, couldn't we go online and pull that up from online?
You might be able to. It's about a 5-minute video if you want to watch the entire thing. I can describe it for you, and I can later on play you a small portion of the council meeting. I downloaded it last night myself and was able to convert it again. We had 2 of the 3 copies provided by Fremont Street that just didn't play. But if you really want to see it,
We're blocked today.
YouTube is blocked. There's your answer. We have no access to anything on. So, having said that,
I can't get that on my phone.
yeah, you can get it on your iPhone, but you can't get it on the city computer. What you're about to see is just a couple of snippets. These individuals dressed as members of the rock band Kiss, and I'm going to speculate something here. This is not by accident. This is my speculation. With a show devoted to Kiss, 2 people dressing up like Kiss, I would bet that there is a lot of confusion amongst tourists as to whether or not these individuals are entertainment provided consistent with the light show by Fremont Street Experience or entrepreneurs. We don't know. We don't know the answer one way or the other. But I want to show you what happens. They come down. The individual in the red shirt appears to be associated with them. This is one of the members. This is another member of the 2 guys dressed up as Kiss. And he's arguing with a tourist in a white T-shirt. You can't see him right now. What you can see is that somehow, during this altercation, we don't have good sound on it or anything. Somebody set this to Michael Jackson's song Thriller, which is why the video has its name. But what we see is the member of the rock band Kiss appears to have in his hand a handheld device which appears to be a taser. He's carrying it throughout portions of the video. And then at some point in time, he puts it right into the chest of the tourist, and he hits the button. You can see the light blue spark coming from his hand into the chest of the tourist. When the video concludes, you can hear somebody say, "Get out of here," or words to that effect, or "and he owes $20." Mr. Victor will testify to this event in a moment when he gets to our other portion of the presentation. But I think it's the feeling that these individuals were charging people money for photographs, and this individual didn't pay, got into some kind of altercation, and that resulted in him being tasered. Again, this is the kind of unregulated activity that is completely inconsistent with the pedestrian wall, with its function, its primary purpose, and the commercial entertainment complex we try to create. The new ordinance. Well, that brings us to the ordinance before you today at recommended. Bill number 2010-31, recognizes that the pedestrian mall is a traditional public forum subject to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. The government must demonstrate a significant interest in such regulation, and the restrictions must be narrowly tailored, leaving alternatives to speech available. We are aware of the standard. I have no doubt that at the end of this, you're going to hear contrary views as to what that standard is and isn't, and whether or not we meet that standard with this particular ordinance, but I'm here to make the case for why we do. Right now, I want to point out something I said earlier in the presentation. There are a number of things that the city can do right now that wouldn't require any laws. They're not going to be enough to regulate them all. But they can be done right now, and I doubt there would be any successful litigation against the city. We can prohibit coercive solicitation, that's blocking, threatening, compelling, or forcing someone to give you. We can do that right now, citywide, including Fremont Street. We can prohibit solicitation within 20 feet of an ATM or 10 feet of the entrance of a commercial building. That's in the law right now. All those building openings on Fremont Street and the like, we can right there prohibit it within 10 feet. Solicitation in convention centers. There's a local case, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. We were able to keep people that were handbillers and leafleters and the like off the space of the Convention and Visitors Authority during shows that were going out there, which was like Comdex and CES and things like that. Court said that's being used for another purpose. They can be regulated and put in another place during those events. Convention protesters. The World Trade Organization met in Seattle, Washington many years ago. They decided in the city of Seattle to separate the protesters from where the delegates were to the convention. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said, sure. They have, it's content neutral, they can be in a separate place, and that was upheld. I'm not going to introduce that case in the record. Solicitors at public fairgrounds in Minneapolis, individuals showed up from the Society for Krishna Consciousness. They were not allowed to go anywhere in the fairground and speak their First Amendment speech, although it was a traditional public forum. They were restricted to a particular area. The content of their speech wasn't regulated at all. It was just a time, place, and manner restriction the court found constitutional. And beach vendors in Waikiki Beach, for a 5-mile section of Waikiki Beach is a restriction as to the type of expressive activity that can occur on or near the beachfront. So these are things, and there are other cases as well, that talk about what can be prohibited right now as a matter of law as it exists in the Ninth Circuit and other circuits around the country. With that, let me show you what it means with respect to the pedestrian wall. I'm going to show you a number of slides up here. We're going to start with Main Street. This is Main to First. First to Casino. Casino to Third. Third to Fourth. Fourth to Las Vegas Boulevard. The 3rd Street spur that we're going to talk about in a moment is a location for the free expression zones. This is North 3rd Street, north of the pedestrian mall. And this is North 1st Street of the pedestrian mall. These are all, this is the entire mall. It's currently defined in the pedestrian mall ordinance. What you have in front of you is a piece of paper that looks like this that has it all put together. In front of you is a color version of the document I have in front of you. I've given a copy to the clerk, and I'd like to mark this as an exhibit and the evidence from here. This particular map represents, and Mr. Victor will testify to it, represents the pedestrian mall with the kiosks and the building entrances, although I think it lacks in some portions the outdoor cafes. So let's just talk about the map itself as it exists. We believe, and we will make the case for it at the council meeting as well, that when we enacted the ordinance that banned solicitation within 10 feet of a building entrance, although we could have gone bigger, some cities have, or in 20 feet of an ATM, we didn't look at the ban near kiosks, because we didn't have kiosks at the time that were really an issue. If we were to look at such a prohibition, you would have to ask yourself, is a kiosk more like an ATM or more like a building entrance? We submit that the record would be substantial that's more like an ATM. And why? When you walk into a building, you're walking into to a business entrance. You probably have money, you're probably going to go shopping, and that's why the law says you can prohibit solicitors from being within 10 feet of you when you walk through a building entrance. Because they know you're likely to be a person that can give them something. And you're more of a captive audience at that choke point. At an ATM, it's 20 feet. Because you're no longer potentially have money in your pocket. You've got it coming out of the machine. Your card is right there. You're a very captive audience. So the distance is bigger at ATMs. The same exists at a kiosk. You're not going into a business. That is the business. The cash drawer is right there. Your cash or credit card are coming right out. You're the same kind of captive audience you are in an ATM. So I think there's a compelling case, in fact, an overwhelming case, that if the distance separation were set for kiosks to keep solicitors away, it'd be 20 feet, not 10 feet. So let's look at the map. At the kiosks, you have an inner circle, that's a 10-foot circle, you've got a 20-foot circle. With a case made for a 20-foot diameter around the kiosks, you can see, looking at your handout map, that the circles overlap substantially throughout the pedestrian walk. An argument could be made right now that with no change in the law, just with those distance separations, you could prohibit solicitation activity of any kind, anywhere within those circles. What that leaves you is the space in between where you see no circles for pedestrian traffic and other activity. We looked at this as a possible alternative to a new ordinance. We call it the Swiss cheese map for obvious reasons. If you were to enact an ordinance, or just leave the ordinance alone, not enact anything, just use the existing law, coercive solicitation within 20 feet of a kiosk, 20 feet of an ATM, 10 feet of a building entrance. And when I say existing law, we would add kiosks and make the case for the 20 feet. If you were to do that, you would end up with something that looks like this, which would be absolutely unenforceable. Why would it be unenforceable? One, nobody knows where 19 feet ends and 21 feet begins. You would have to literally, on the pavement, around every kiosk, every time you move them, draw a circle so everybody knew where you could be and where you couldn't be. And the kiosks are from time to time rearranged. The other thing that you would have is a temporal problem. Individuals who complain about activity within these areas would have to pretty much catch them and prove it, because let's face it, by the time the cop gets there, proving it and the exact place that they were, it's going to be almost impossible. So enforcement of this kind of model is almost impossible. And as a result of considering it, we felt it didn't work. We also looked at the spaces in between, and Mr. Victor will testify to this as well, and said, could you have free expression zones in between those circles? And the answer was no, because of the amount of pedestrian traffic. Those are areas, I mean, that mall, as you've seen at night, is packed. And when there's special events, it's even more packed. And as a result, it was felt the need to keep the pedestrian flow moving and to keep access to the retail going. It didn't work in this portion of the wall. Let me talk about what the court decision rendered by Judge Ezra the last time around meant. Judge Ezra said a number of things. Ultimately, all the regulations that the city had in place for the wall were thrown out. But before they were thrown out, Judge Ezra acknowledged a number of things that the Ninth Circuit had found and that he had found. And I'm putting them all together on one nice slide. Court decisions concerning the Fremont Street Experience have recognized that the ACLU and any person challenging the ordinance has to acknowledge, one, that restrictions upon the act of solicitation are content neutral, that the city and the Fremont Street Experience have a significant interest in assuring safe, efficient, and orderly movement of pedestrians in the pedestrian wall. That's a given. We don't have to argue that. Courts know that. The city and the Fremont Street Experience have a significant interest in protecting the local merchant economy from unfair competition. What kind of unfair competition? What happens when you put up a free table with T-shirts, very much like the T-shirts that are being sold by a person in a kiosk who's paying $5,000 a month or more to rent a kiosk. That's obviously not fair competition, and Mr. Vickers is going to talk about the effect of that kind of activity on kiosk owners. Another given is that the city and the Fremont Street Experience have a significant interest in protecting visitors from solicitors in an environment where freedom of movement is restricted. The city and the Fremont Street Experience have a significant interest in preventing the disruption of mall entertainment and in disrupting visitors' enjoyment of the mall experience. And finally, the city and the Fremont Street Experience have a significant interest in protecting the aesthetic appearance of the mall by eliminating visual blight caused by an unsightly vendor. Those facts, I think, have been established by the videos and the pictures, and they will be enhanced by testimony from Mr. Victor in a moment. Now let's talk about what we came down with. The city, as I said, have added 3 things to the list of things prohibited in the mall, anywhere in the mall. In addition to unicycles, parades, bicycles, skateboarding, and the like, we added amplified sound, for reasons I think I've already made clear in the record that I've made. Throwing things to the mall, which I don't think anybody has any argument with. That's not any kind of expressive activity protected by the Constitution. Should have probably been in there in the first place when we enacted the ordinance. And hula hoops, which we made the case for, which I don't think is expressive activity either protected by the Constitution. What did we prohibit mall-wise that's only allowed in free expression zones? 3 things in the ordinance. Solicitation, as defined in the municipal code, leafleting, and mall entertainment. Before I go any further, I'm going to tell you that when we drafted the ordinance, we had a lot of evidence. Mr. Victor has provided a lot of evidence. Reports that I've read provide a lot of evidence. I am going to tell you as of right now, in my opinion, that evidence does not arise to a level that I think would support limiting leafleting to only free expression zones. And so today we will ask that this, if it does pass out a recommendation, pass out as amended so that only solicitation and mall entertainment are limited to free expression zones. We are not at this point in time going to include leafleting. If in the future the activity in the mall rises to a level, I feel we can make the case here at the recommending committee before the city council and before a court of law, we may bring it back. So I reserve the right to do that. But today I will tell you in all candor, I don't think the evidence rises to that level. I think it does with respect to solicitation and mall entertainment.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes.
What's the definition of leafleting?
Handing out material by hand.
So,
Could be cards, pamphlets, literature.
holding a sign?
Holding a sign is not leafleting. We're talking about handing things out. Holding a sign is completely different.
So it's just standing there, walking around,
Right. You don't even have to
Handing
walk
out
around.
a-
Standing still or walking around, handing out material,
handing out material.
basically. The passersby. Not a stationary zone. That's never been included. A box that has literature in it. That's not leafleting. An individual handing things out.
So the one video where somebody is there with a sign and they're yelling something, what is,
That
where
is
does-
nothing. That has never been prohibited.
So where does that-
The ordinance was enacted.
where does that fit into soliciting, leafleting, and entertainment?
It doesn't.
So that would be allowed?
That's allowed. That's allowed.
Okay.
We'll look in the
Under
future at
under
structures, and we'll look at things like that, but I think, because we do need to go back at some point in time, because this ordinance isn't going to fix everything. But one of the things we need to go back and take a look at as well are structures in the wall. Now, I don't think under any circumstances is a sign of the type that you saw going to be a structure that would be prohibited. You know, a small sign, what I was seeing, there's 2 foot, 4 foot by 4 foot signs in the like. At some point in time, you get to what you saw with the anti-abortion protesters, which was a large metal structure. And that's completely different. And what we need to do is, and we will come back in the future and look at this, is structures, unsafe structures are already banned citywide. But we have one definition in the building code, we have another definition over here. We actually need a specific definition, I think, in the pedestrian law to address structures in that. But what I wanted you to see with the solicited conduct was the megaphone is speaking the free expression coupled with the signs, literally shoulder to shoulder blocking pedestrian traffic. A sign alone might be hard to argue blocks anything depending on what the person's doing. Conceivably it could, conceivably it couldn't. Several people shoulder to shoulder standing in front of an intersection. I don't think there's any argument at all blocking traffic.
But the two guys standing there with a sign, that would not be prohibited activity
Unless
under
they're
this
asking for
ordinance.
something, that is not permitted.
Okay.
Three expressions, what did we look at? Just explain that we looked at the mall itself. Let's talk about the part where the canopy exists. The canopy exists between Main Street and 4th Street, to the north and the south of the former Fremont Street. We looked at that area, and as you can see by the Swiss cheese map, there are very few opportunities for free expressive activity in that area because of, one, the kiosks, two, the light show draws people to the entire center of the mall during the evening presentations, and the stages on 1st Street and 3rd Street also draw huge crowds. The other thing,
Go ahead.
the other thing Mr. Victor will testify to is that the whole mall, in spite of the kiosks, is used for a lot of special events, particularly car shows and things like that, where vehicles are parked in all of those free spaces and other things are moved around to help accommodate the pedestrians. But it's always a challenge between programming the mall for a special event, allowing the retail kiosks to be viable, and allow pedestrians to move back and forth. So that was looked at and decided that that was not viable as a place for these types of zones. We looked at 1st Street. 1st Street is vacated on the south side for the Golden Nugget and the Pioneer Club, so that's privately owned now. That's no longer a pedestrian mall. The south side, the north side, which is not vacated, is where the new 1st Street stage is. So that stage itself precludes its use as a free expressive area. We looked at Casino Center, which is a thoroughfare, still open to pedestrian or vehicular traffic. That's not a place where anybody goes. We looked at 4th Street, also open to vehicular traffic, and we looked at the area far to the east. That's the area between 4th Street and Las Vegas Boulevard. Technically, it's part of the pedestrian mall. It was not looked at as a viable alternative because, one, I think a good argument can be made by anybody challenging the ordinance that you took people completely away from the canopy part of the Fremont Street experience, put them in another area that was kind of a completely different complexion. But two, the restaurants in that area are more plentiful than any other place in the Fremont Street experience. There are outdoor cafes at Hennessy's, Mickey Finn's, and at the former Jillian's. There may be more in the future. Those are places where you can prohibit solicitation for the next many feet of tables and the like, but that doesn't really matter. If you're a tourist, you're having a nice lunch or a dinner outside, or local as well, you're not going to leave money as a tip for anyone. You're reluctant to pull cash out. If soliciting activity is occurring next to your dining table. So we didn't look at that as a viable area either. What we looked at was 3rd Street. And 3rd Street is also problematic. 3rd Street, all the way to Ogden, is part of the pedestrian mall. And while a lot of people may look at it and say, it's the old 3rd Street, 3rd Street is a very viable venue for Fremont Street experience. They consider it prime real estate. That real estate is used for car shows, it's used for setting up vending opportunities. I think they've had portable stages there. It is very active and used as part of the Fremont Street experience as a whole. It's also a place where the neon signs exist as part of the expanded neon sign museum. But most importantly, and of concern I'm sure to this council, is the fact that that is the connector between the Fremont Street experience and the Mob Museum and the new CIM project that used to be called the Lady Luck. You go by the Lady Luck today, you'll see windows open in both towers. There's active construction going on. That is a project that's expected to be completed and opened in the near future. And there is a fear that if you create a gauntlet of solicitation and other activity on 3rd Street, you're going to hurt the commercial viability of that project, and you can prevent individuals wanting to move back and forth between the new Mob Museum and the Fremont Street experience. So it wasn't likely that we looked at Third Street, it also has problems, but not the problems that I identified as existing on the Fremont Street experience, or Fremont Street itself, and the area by Neodopolis. What we did was identify two initial zones based on the amount of expressive activity seen in the mall in the last couple of years. Two zones have been identified. There is a new map that looks very much like the slide you're looking at now, that is going to replace Exhibit 1 or Exhibit A in your backup material. This is produced by our planning department. This is a visual depiction of the three expression zones that we propose in this ordinance. They are approximately 20 feet back from the shade line of the Fremont Street Experience canopy that's to allow pedestrians to move in front. The areas are 12 feet wide on each side, on the west and east side of 3rd Street, and they are 100 feet long. So two 1,200-foot areas, 2,400 square feet, could be reserved for expressive activity, mall solicitation, and mall entertainment. This activity would be completely unregulated and subject to first come, first served. Completely content neutral. We don't care what you do up there with respect to solicitation or mall activity, provided coercive solicitation obviously prohibited, but other solicitation, you can do whatever you want. Councilman?
Brad, you continue to mention the fact that the content of those individuals performing within this proposed area on 3rd and Fremont, and you mentioned on several occasions that these individuals will not be regulated. Who patrols or regulate the mall?
Let me say this, the mall right now is in the city. The Metropolitan Police Department has a force down there from time to time patrolling the mall. The Fremont Street Experience has its own private security down there. And those are the two entities that are responsible for security in the mall right now. I can tell you, my guess is that Mr. Victor will shake his head yes or no, about 90% of it is probably Fremont Street Experience private security that is patrolling the mall right now and handling those kinds of issues.
Okay, so within the 12 by 100-foot radius area in which is being proposed to this recommending board today, who's going to regulate or enforce that the entertainers remain within that geographic location?
That would be the responsibility of Fremont Street Experience Security and the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. And let me explain what this is and what this isn't. We're only saying two types of conduct, solicitation and mall entertainment, are limited to these two areas. Nothing else. Mall entertainment and solicitation. We're not going to tell you what kind of entertainment. We're not going to tell you what kind of solicitation. We have no interest in the conduct, or excuse me, the content of your solicitation. We have no interest in the content of your mall entertainment. We're not going to do with loudspeakers, because that's going to be prohibited, mall-wide. There's no exception. It's not going to get to go in these zones and turn on an amplifier. That's still inconsistent with the mall. It's right next to the light and sound show. We'll drown it out, compete with it, and it's not consistent. But what we will allow is any kind of solicitation activity and any kind of mall entertainment, first come, first serve in those areas. I want to state for the record that Mr. Rowe is here on behalf of the Fremont Hotel. Believe me, it was no easy task explaining to individual entities downtown that we're going to have free expression zones and they're going to be somewhere. And these happen to be, well, at least one of them happens to be right next to the Fremont Hotel. These areas were selected because based on the size of the numbers of people that are coming in at the same time to solicit, wouldn't fill nearly one of these areas right now. I think Mr. Victor will testify to that. So we made it even larger. So we think we will accommodate anybody who wants to come. But these are not necessarily carved in stone. This is the first cut. If these turn out to be in the wrong place and inconsistent, we reserve the right to come back and move them in the future. We will always provide them, but we will reserve the right to come back and move them. We'll reserve the right to come back and expand them. If it turns out there are more people interested in protected conduct or mall entertainment, which I don't think is protected conduct, but if there are people interested in protected conduct and there's not enough room for them here, we will come back with a recommendation to expand the free expression areas. But we believe that these not only are, one, let's talk about time, place, and manner. There's no time restriction. This is any time you want. There's no manner restriction. We're not putting any regulation on how you do it, or what you say, or what the content is. There's just a place restriction. That's all we're doing, is a place restriction. The other thing we're looking at is, are there alternative means to express your First Amendment speech or your solicited speech? Well, one, you're going to reach the entire target audience of the pedestrian mall from this area. But second, look at the pedestrian mall. This is a footprint 5 blocks long along what used to be Fremont Street. The entire perimeter of the pedestrian mall is publicly owned sidewalk, which has never been regulated and completely open to First Amendment speech or expressive speech. Anybody who comes in that mall, you can get them on the sidewalk outside the mall and solicit them all you want. We're only talking within the pedestrian mall. So you can reach the target audience anywhere around the perimeter of the mall as they enter. And once in, you can reach them from 3rd Street. Again, another picture of the expression zone. At the back of this, you can see this is looking from north to south with the 3rd Street stage visually depicted in the graphic. And this is the area as it looks today. I want to say right now, before anybody jumps me, this particular photograph shows a really large newspaper vending machine in this area that's going to be carved out. That's going to be removed. This area is going to be completely cleared except for palm trees, so there won't be anything obstructing it. And it's going to be painted either with a line around the perimeter or shaded in the middle, so everybody knows exactly where the area is and where the lines are, much like the area we painted downtown around the courthouse for Winning Chapel solicitors that has worked perfectly since we put it into effect. It's going to be painted or marked clearly on the ground, signage identifying it, and there'll be one more. Tables will be allowed in this area, but not your table. If you want a table, they will be provided on a first-come, first-served basis, free of charge, and virtually immediately by the Fremont Street Experience. That's to control the type of structure people are bringing into the mall. People bringing in dangerous things, flimsy tables, things that wouldn't withstand wind or tourists hitting it or something like that. But we'll provide all the tables you want for free, anytime, within these free expression zones. So tabling is back, solicitation is back, and mall entertainment is back in these 2 areas. Councilman?
Brad, I've been to other communities, many communities around the country, and those cities seem to require entertainment or individuals permits in order for them to go out and entertain. Have we considered that?
Yes. Let me tell you about the one that I look at the most. The mayor asked me to look at another one. I haven't finished looking at that. Let's talk about a couple of places where they don't do that. If you've ever been to Waikiki Beach, you'll see people not exactly on the beach, but off to the side. On those particular night, some guy with a parrot, that'll let the parrot sit on your shoulder, take a picture for $20. Other people doing other kinds of activities. I don't know how they regulate that or how they let that. The one I'm familiar with that is a bit analogous to the Fremont Street Experience is the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica, California. Now, the difference, and I've been asked this question, why don't we do what they do? What they do is they pick and license entertainers because they feel, and maybe appropriately so, that entertainment in the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica is conducive to tourists coming downtown. It creates part of the ambiance of the pedestrian mall in Santa Monica. So when you come down, you're not just there to walk up and down the promenade, to visit the restaurants and the shops. You're there for the entertainment as well. It's kind of kitschy and kind of fun. And because they look at it that way, they license the people that do mall entertainment down there. they kind of pick and choose a little bit, but they also have applications that people fill out and like, and they review the spaces that they use. The difference between Santa Monica's Promenade and Fremont Street Experience is that Fremont Street Experience picked its entertainment from the day this project was conceived. This wasn't built to just be one big mall where you walk up and down between a bunch of casinos. If that were the case, you could pretty much have left the old situation alone, let people walk up and down the sidewalks. This was conceived as a project that not only provided a pedestrian mall experience and retail experience to pay for all of it, but provided its own entertainment. The entertainment being the stage shows. So when the Beach Boys come here, it's playing on the 3rd Street stage. That's because Mr. Victor and his clients picked that kind of entertainment and they program it. When you see light shows overhead at night, they've decided that's the entertainment we want. They've decided they didn't want to go with the occasional entertainer block by block by block. You didn't, if that's what they wanted, or the city wanted, you didn't have to build a canopy for that. And they don't have a canopy in Santa Monica. Just a big wide open mall. So like I say, I think it's really just a programming choice and a policy choice that was made many, many years ago. And that choice was, the primary purpose was an organized, pretty much predictable on-the-spot sound and light show. People knew when it started, when it ended, so they could be out in the street to watch it. Stage shows that could be promoted in advance, occurring during various seasons of the year, different times. Kiosks. But you can see Fremont Street right now. Fremont Street right now could have entertainers that they pick in that mall. And from time to time, they do, not just on the stage. But it's their mall under the operation and management agreement to control and program. And
Very-
they have
very good
decided not
point,
to
Brad.
allow this freelance, free-form activity.
Very good point, which basically takes me back to my initial question or comment in relation to Santa Monica versus Fremont Street Experience. If Santa Monica can regulate and license their acts, then what will prohibit someone from going out into the area of Santa Monica and just setting up?
Mhm.
Because to me, it's a question of legality of freedom of speech again.
Right. Well, let me go on a limb here and say that I think even the courts have recognized that an unregulated, completely anybody, anywhere kind of situation, even in the 3rd Street Promenade, doesn't work. They have the same rights to pedestrian flow and to a hassle-free environment, so to speak, as we do. And when I say hassle-free, I'm talking about, more or less act upon act upon act, where you have to run a gauntlet of people before you can get where you want to get. With one person playing this instrument, another playing the other, drowning each other out, this doesn't work as a practical matter, regardless of what kind of speech you're talking about. But again, I think there's a lot of debate as to whether or not this activity that you're looking at when it comes to entertainment is protected activity by the First Amendment. I think some could be, some isn't, some is in between. And that's what people go to law school for, is to kind of argue where those shades of gray are. But, a lot of this stuff is just 100% commercial. Just 100% commercial. And probably can be completely, regulated, prohibited, or whatever under any ordinance. Some of it may have a First Amendment component to it. But we're not going to pick and choose which does and which doesn't. We're going to say, entertainment, that's where you go. That's where you can perform. We're not going to pick and choose. We think it's content neutral. We think it's reasonable time, place, and manner. We think it leaves open all viable alternatives for individuals to reach that same audience, speak their same speech, contact anyone they want to talk to.
Okay.
That concludes my presentation as to the new ordinance, the history, the legislation, and the need for regulation. I would, with your permission, like to ask Mr. Victor to come to the microphone right now.
Down here?
Actually, anyone you want, Joe. If you want to sit next to me, I'll be.
Are you going to swear me in under oath?
Marked as Exhibit A or 1 or
I do, as Exhibit 1.
Exhibit 1. Okay, so we're going to refer to the map of Fremont Street. Can you just state your name and for the record and tell us where you work?
My name is Jeff Victor. I'm the president of the Fremont Street Experience.
And as president of Fremont Street Experience, Mr. Victor, what are your duties and responsibilities?
We operate the Fremont Street Experience LLC, which is the common area between the businesses that line Fremont Street from Main Street down to Las Vegas Boulevard. We also operate the parking garage that's located between 4th Street and Las Vegas Boulevard. We have about 100 employees in the company, which are made up of a mix of security guards, cleanliness folks, entertainment and special events, operators and technicians, marketing, finance, public relations.
Very good. How long have you been the president of Fremont Street Experience LLC?
A little over 4 years.
And were you president of the LLC before the ruling by the federal district court judge in 2009 that struck down the ordinances regulating the mall?
Yes.
And you've obviously been the president after those ordinances were struck down, is that correct?
Correct.
Have you noticed a difference in the type of activity in the pedestrian mall after the court decision in 2009 striking down the pedestrian mall ordinance?
Absolutely.
What kind of differences have you noticed?
In particular, the amount of individuals that come down to solicit for tips by providing what I guess they would consider entertainment experiences on the mall has exploded from the day that the decision was made until now.
Have you had complaints from individuals? Let's start with tourists or visitors to the mall regarding conduct in the mall by individuals involved in commercial entertainment.
Numerous complaints from guests, but the complaints haven't been limited to the guests. But clearly, the guests are not comfortable in large part with the activity out on the mall.
Did you have an opportunity to sit here during the presentation that I gave regarding pictures and videos of the Fremont Street Experience during the latter 2009 and early 2010?
Yes.
Did my representation on the record accurately reflect the content of those videos and the conduct that was displayed in the videos?
Yes.
Are you aware of the incident involving individuals dressed as members of the Rock and Kiss in the Fremont Street Experience?
Yes, I was not there that evening, but I am aware of it. If you see the video, you'll see one of our security guard actually leaves his post from, he has a fixed post during the light show at the intersection of Casino Center. He's wearing a yellow vest, and you'll see him leave his post to come and deal with this distraction and disruption, and he actually filled out a statement, and I have seen the full video that was provided, by the way, by a guest who just filmed that and put it up on YouTube.
Are you aware of the results of the investigation conducted by Fremont Street Experience into that incident?
Only to the extent that the customer decided not to file a complaint and left.
Did you become aware of what happened even though he didn't file a complaint?
Again, my best source of knowledge is through the video that you find on YouTube, and then what our security guard witnessed as he ran up to try and just deal with the aftermath of it.
Very good. You're also familiar with other street entertainers, Mr. Animation, Robot Man, and the like in the pedestrian mall?
Yes.
Are there other street entertainers that appear in the pedestrian mall aside from the ones whose examples we played before the recommending committee today?
Oh, dozens, yeah. Things like the person that sells balloon animals, the showgirls that walk up and down the mall taking photos. There are statue characters. You name it, we've got it.
Have you also become aware of other expressive activity as the type we saw in the videos and the pictures that included the anti-abortion protest, the rally at the Gay Rights Parade, and the pro-religious people that were speaking on Fremont Street?
Yeah, we do have folks coming out to either exploit their private businesses or send a message. There are pretty regular setups up and down the mall for purposes of commercial activity.
Have both the individuals not involved in entertainment and individuals involved in entertainment occasionally used amplification systems to broadcast a message?
Yeah, absolutely. You saw a lot of it in the video, and we have it on a regular basis. basis, whether it's connected to a car battery or it's battery operated. We have amplified sound on a regular basis.
Does that activity, in your opinion, is it consistent with the programming of the pedestrian wall by the Fremont Street Experience in both the light, stage, and sound shows?
No, I mean, the sound system in Fremont Street Experience is quite extraordinary. It was engineered with a great deal of concern for the smooth flow of sound from one end to the other. There's a total of 550,000 watts of sound blown through over 200 speakers with a very clear separation of distance. We have the ability to zone those speakers out so that we can control individual experiences either in front of the stages or between the stages, and do that on a regular basis. When somebody brings their own amplified sound and drops it in the midst of that, clearly it creates an audible muddiness or confused experience to what we're trying to create. When you're talking about the stages themselves, or like we have a street entertainer that's been out there for 10 years under our guidance. His name is Carl Ferris. We escorted Carl out there and set him up with a Fremont Street Experience truck, sound system. We provided the zone for him, both audibly and in the sky, on the canopy above with his image. When somebody that also plays saxophone just appears and wants to stand next to Carl while he's performing, a Fremont Street Experience approved performance, it's absolutely disruptive. If somebody comes down and sets up an amplifier so that they can do something, whether it's saxophone or otherwise, it's absolutely a disruption.
The individual that you program, though, you pick the exact place, time, and manner in which he entertains individuals, and he's limited to that particular.
Absolutely.
And it's not open to other individuals. You said if others come there while he's doing it, they compete with him, grounds him out, or.
Absolutely.
With respect to individuals who use amplification systems, have you observed the effect of those amplification systems on the tourist traffic that moves up and down the pedestrian wall?
Yeah, it's intimidating. Some people, I assume, believe that this is something that we've sanctioned, like Carl, and some people are weary that it's somebody that we've not sanctioned, and it's intimidating, and for some folks, scary.
People tend to shy away and move away from those individuals that have amplification systems. And in the process of moving away, does it create fewer places of the pedestrian wall for pedestrians to move back and forth?
Yeah, it alters the flow of traffic.
Does it sometimes completely impede the flow of traffic in the pedestrian wall?
Yeah.
Has it on occasion completely plugged the traffic and stopped traffic in the pedestrian wall?
Especially around intersections and doorways, yeah.
Let me call your attention to Exhibit 1, which is the map that you have in front of you in the large version of the council. Have you had occasion to look at that map prior to appearing at this recommending committee today?
Yes, I have.
And is that an accurate depiction of the pedestrian mall roughly as it appears, both in physical description, that is the perimeter, and the location of kiosks within the pedestrian wall?
Yeah, largely, I see a few changes, like the Golden Nuggets expansion down here on First Street isn't represented. There may be it's hard to tell because there's so many overlapping circles. There may be a change in the outdoor dining experiences, and clearly the locations of the kiosks change on a regular basis. By and large, this is the Fremont Street Experience.
How many kiosks do you have in the Fremont Street Experience?
38.
Do the individuals who have those kiosks have an arrangement, financial arrangement with the Fremont Street Experience?
Yes, they have a contract that they sign and pay lease amounts for on a monthly basis.
Do those lease amounts vary from kiosk to kiosk?
They do.
Can you give us the range that people pay to use a kiosk on Fremont Street?
Roughly $2,000 to $5,000 a month.
$2,000, $5,000 a month? And are there individuals who pay more?
Yes.
Are there kiosks that where you get a percentage of the gross receipts as part of the kiosk rental?
Those would be the ones that would exceed the higher boundaries.
Gotcha. And those individuals sign that agreement knowing that they will have an opportunity to commercially vend whatever product it is that they have from that particular kiosk?
That's correct.
And do you get involved in selecting the type of commercial product that individuals get from the kiosk?
Absolutely.
So you wouldn't allow somebody to vend something that you consider inappropriate in the Fremont Street Experience?
Absolutely.
So you also don't want individuals with kiosks necessarily compete with each other. So you wouldn't, for example, have 38 people all selling jewelry or 38 people all selling paintings or statuary.
That's right, we worked hard to reduce the redundancy.
So you have a lack of redundancy, of commercial opportunity, and the individuals who pay for those kiosks, do they sign those leases for a period of time, a term?
They do.
What's the typical term?
They're usually rolling month to month. Most of our vendors have been there for years.
Have you had occasion to work personally with the kiosk vendors regarding complaints, regarding activity within the Fremont Street Experience that they feel is either competing with or inconsistent with the retail commercial use of the mall?
Yeah, almost without exception, all of the retailers have come to both our retail director and then myself to complain about how disruptive this has been, both to the experience of the customer trying to shop and ultimately to their ability to conduct sales.
Did you hear my representation earlier that kiosks are a place where individuals actually pull their money out in a public area and they have a financial transaction with a kiosk operator?
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, you're completely exposed in the middle of the street.
In your opinion, is a kiosk more like an ATM or more like an entryway to a business with respect to the amount of space you need to provide between a kiosk vendor and a solicitor?
I'd say, given the proximity of the cash drawer, it would be more like the keyboard on an ATM.
Have you had individuals express to you a desire to not pay rent or get reduced rent as a result of competition from unregulated activity in the pedestrian mall?
Yes.
What have they told you?
They've told us that their sales have been dramatically affected, some kiosks more than others, depending on the type of product that they sell. But they have very much expressed that we're responsible for maintaining the mall, and because we've not done so, that they think we're responsible for adjusting the rent.
If revenues were to decline as a result of individuals pulling out of kiosks or other retail opportunities in the mall, would the Fremont Street Experience be able to operate and maintain the pedestrian mall under the existing contract with the City of Las Vegas and the redevelopment agency?
We have several sources of funds. The retail kiosk is a significant portion of what we do. If that were to decline significantly, it would in fact impact our ability to maintain the mall in terms of its cleanliness, to secure the mall, control the mall, and then, of course, it would impact our ability to invite guests down through marketing and PR activities, and then once we got them here, it would impact our ability to entertain and keep them here and help ensure that they'd come back for another visit.
Did you work with the City of Las Vegas in the last year to look at the possible creation of free expression zones within the Fremont Street Experience?
Yeah.
Did you have an opportunity prior to that to look at things like the map that's marked as Exhibit 1?
Yes.
Turning your attention to that map for a moment, you see the circles on that map that I have represented, the outermost circle being 20 feet, the innermost being 10 feet?
Yes.
Those are circles around retail kiosks, is that correct?
Yes, it appears.
You also see other semicircles or lines around entryways to buildings, for example, Fitzgerald's, Fremont, and the like. You see those
Yes.
lines?
Yes.
Those all represent areas that are currently under existing solicitation law, areas that are prohibited for solicitation,
Yes.
or would be if we looked at the kiosk situation.
Right.
The areas in between those circles, what are those dead areas used for, those blank areas used for?
That would be where the people go.
If individuals were to set up solicitation stations in that area, would you have a smooth flow of pedestrian traffic?
You know, as you can see, Fremont Street is not very wide. It's only 80 feet wide, and so there's a fair amount of obstacles throughout the mall. Anyway, the legs to the canopies, to the canopy itself aren't shown here. Some other structural things, including electrical junction boxes and stuff, are not shown. Anything that we do to add clutter to the mall is problematic in terms of moving guests around.
So let me cut to the chase. If there were first expression zones created in those blank areas in between those circles, would that, in your opinion, impede pedestrian traffic in the pedestrian mall?
Yes.
Was there a time when there was a discussion about setting up free expression zones around the poles themselves on the pedestrian mall?
Yes.
Were models constructed to see if that worked?
Yes.
Were you present when those were demonstrated and looked at?
Yes.
In your opinion, did they work?
I don't think they provided the ample amount of room for the folks that are going to want to come down and take advantage of these things. I didn't think they were ideal locations for the entertainers themselves, and they fell largely within the circle shown here on the page, so no, they didn't work.
Was this an attempt to actually build a round table around the round poles that support the canopy itself?
Yeah, we mocked up a model.
And did that have an impact on pedestrian traffic as well as the other problems you identified?
Yes.
And as a result, was that thrown out, I guess, as an option for a free expression zone?
Yeah, we tried to find a more viable option.
Did you also look at other areas within the Fremont Street experience, including First Street and the area around the old Neonopolis shopping area?
Yes, we did.
Were there viable areas on First Street?
No, very limited, because most of that is behind the stage. The part on First Street South is privately owned by the folks that own the Pioneer Building. The space over by Neonopolis would be ideal for us. I'm not sure that that offers the kind of exposure to the audience that the entertainers would desire.
Are there also more outdoor cafes in the Neonopolis area? That is the block between 4th Street and Las Vegas Boulevard in the
Yeah.
Fremont Street experience?
That's actually the largest concentration of outdoor cafes down in that area.
And without revealing any names, are there potentially more restaurants about to move into that area?
I've got a couple that are looking at a space that we operate. I don't know what's happening on the Neonopolis side.
Okay. But without revealing any names, you are looking at more restaurant activity
Yes.
in that particular area. And that includes outdoor dining opportunities?
Yes.
And as a result of that, that area was also rejected because it didn't feel it was close enough to the audience that was being affected by the restriction and the outdoor dining being affected by it as well?
That's right.
Did you have an opportunity to look at 3rd Street as an alternative for this type of activity?
Yes.
And when you looked at 3rd Street, what were the issues posed by locating free expression zones there?
Well, 3rd Street is an extremely valuable area for us. That is an area that we use regularly for special events in particular. It's also, when we do concerts, where the crowd backs up into. But in terms of special events, it's, as you can see by the rest of the circles on the page, that is our special event space. And so the concern with giving up any of that is that we've hurt our ability to do special events.
Did you have occasion to talk to individuals who are responsible for the operation and management of the Fremont Hotel to see how they felt?
Yes, I did.
And how did they feel about having free expression zones located next to the property?
Not thrilled by any means. Understanding, as we are, of the situation, but not thrilled that it would be there.
Did you have occasion to talk to the mayor of the city of Las Vegas regarding the possible impact of these free expression zones on 3rd Street on the new law museum?
Yes, I did.
And was that problematic?
Yeah, this is the gateway to what would be the Mob Museum and the CIM Group's investment in the Lady Luck. And it's not considered unimportant that we would be altering the use of that space.
You do understand that if the council, if the recommended committee forwards this ordinance and the council approves it, that you will lose 2,400 square feet of area on 3rd Street.
I am aware.
Are you able to, in spite of the challenges, program around that?
I believe so.
Did you participate with the city in looking at all other means of providing alternative space for solicitation and mall entertainment?
Yes.
And was this in the final analysis, the only spot that appeared to be reasonable alternative to the entire mall?
Yes.
Would also ask you, are you familiar with the area outside the pedestrian mall? That is the actual perimeter of the mall. That is the area outside of Fremont Street that goes around the entire perimeter of the map you see as Exhibit 1?
Oh, sure.
Is that area all open public sidewalk?
Oh, yeah.
That's all area where individuals can stand and solicit or speak any kind of speech they want?
Yes.
And I qualify that by saying except for those kinds of speech that are otherwise prohibited by law, like coercive speech or other speech that has always been held to be illegal. Screaming, firing, moving house, and fighting words and things like that. Mr. Victor, just in general, would you describe the mall as more orderly or less orderly after the last decision of the planning board judge?
Far less orderly.
I don't think I've answered the questions, Mr. Victor.
Okay.
Council has any? You have anything to add?
You have questions for Mr. Victor?
Well, for both.
Mr. Victor, if you wouldn't mind remaining in your seat, council has questions for both.
If I could,
Brad
I'll wrap up
himself.
and let's leave it up to you. I want to put into the record a case, Hampton International Communications versus Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. It's a case I told you, it's a local ruling that allowed the restriction of individuals during shows put on at the Las Vegas Convention Center, saying individuals couldn't be on the property or certain parts of the property on the sidewalks, soliciting or leafleting during the convention. I want to put on the record a copy of Efron versus International Society for Creation of Consciousness. That's the Minneapolis Fairground case I told you about. Individuals who solicited were limited to take part in the fairground. I want to put on the record One World, One Family Now versus City of Honolulu, which is the case that limited expressive activity along Honolulu. I want to put on the record a copy of Menotti versus City of Seattle, which is the case that restricted the people at the World Trade Organization protests to certain areas and not necessarily where they wanted to be. I want to put on the record two cases involving court decisions that looked at alternative channels of communication that must be left open when you restrict speech. That is Smith versus City of Fort Lauderdale and Gresham versus Peterson. I found both of those with the court. And I'd also like to put on the record two cases that discuss speech and conduct and expressive activity that interferes with revenue, and says that that is something we can also consider and regulating. Those cases are Children of the Rosary versus City of Phoenix and LeBron versus National Railroad Passenger Corporation Amtrak. Those are both filed in court. I would also at this time like to make part of the record, the entire record, the City Council meeting, recommending committees that were held involving the 1993 pedestrian law ordinance, all revisions to that ordinance, the 1995 solicitation ordinance, and all record that has been created with respect to the pedestrian law and regulations of the pedestrian law for this time. With that, I'm going to set on the record. I have nothing more to add. I'm not answering any questions for the record.
Thank you, and for the record, Mr. Jerbick has submitted all of those case files to the clerk. At this time, I'll open up for discussion. Council.
All right, Brad, on page 5, on line 22, when it talks about the following expressive conduct is permitted in the free exercise zone. So if I heard you correctly, leafleting you're going to take out?
That's correct. It'll be our recommendation that at the end of this recommending committee, when you vote to pass or don't pass the bill, you do it as amended. And the amendment would be to strike line 24, which says to leafleting and so the new version of this ordinance would read, the following expressive conduct is permitted in any free expression zone. 1, solicitation is defined in LVMC 10.44.1010, and 2, mall entertainment.
Okay, so on page 2 on line 18 where it defines leafleting, are you taking that out?
No, we're going to continue to have a definition in it, but
Okay.
we're not going to restrict it.
Okay, so so when somebody reads this ordinance, they will see that what the definition of leafleting is. but there won't be any mention of whether it's allowed, or it would just say it won't be any mention as prohibited.
That's correct.
But it will be defined, so if somebody wants to leaflet on Fremont Street Experience, they can do it.
That's correct.
And as from what you're telling me, this definition is sufficient, so if any citizen reads that, they'll know exactly what leafleting is. The police will know what it is, security know what it is, so there won't be any conflict when somebody leaflets. And do you agree with that, Jeff? When you read that line, does that?
I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me when I look.
I just want to be real clear that people know what they can do in the leafleting area.
I guess I would have questions about what leafleting means. Anything with a piece of paper, or if it means that it's an ad or a coupon or what. I have my own questions.
Well, see, if Jeff can't define it,
I
then
will work with Jeff on it in security, because I can tell you after this ordinance, if it passes, there will be a considerable amount of education that will have to occur with respect to Fremont Street Experience security and with Metro. That particular sentence to me, and that way we can do more detail, is the passing out of anything, written, printed, or graphic. So it can be a picture. It can be something printed on a card. It can be something handwritten on a card. But that's what it is.
okay, but somebody standing on a Fremont Street Experience with a big sign, a huge sign, is that permissible under leafleting?
It's not leafleting, and it's permissible. That's something that we call just carrying a sign, for want of a better way to put it. It's not solicitous activity. What you just described, merely holding a sign, is not solicitation activity. It's not leafleting.
So it would be allowed.
Right.
So I could,
Now, there might be other things that prevent it. I
I
mean,
could
if there's a
stand-
sign with a big metal spike and it's dangerous, or it's a weapon or something like that, that might be something different.
but under this ordinance, if I stand there with a big sign, save the whales, that would be permitted activity.
Permitted with one caveat: blocking or impeding pedestrian traffic is prohibited citywide, including the mall.
Okay.
If you're just standing there, you're not impeding anybody, you're fine.
Okay. But so leafleting, what you're talking about is actually handing out material. Okay, all right. If you could just take another stab at that with Jeff, just to make sure that if somebody reads that, they know exactly what is permitted activity under leafleting. Okay, now, under solicitation and mall entertainment, so those two are going to be prohibited except in the free zone areas. Now, soliciting and mall entertainment could be a commercial enterprise, or it could not be a commercial enterprise, correct?
Correct.
I mean, you could stand out there and entertain and not ask for money. You just want to entertain people.
Right.
And you don't have anything out there asking for money, throw coins in here. Same with soliciting, correct? So, Jeff, how much soliciting and mall entertainment occurs on Fremont Street Experience where there's no currency attached to it? You see what I'm asking you?
Zero. Everybody out
Zero.
there is conducting business.
So nobody goes out there to sing and dance and not ask for money at the same time.
No.
So let me ask this. I know that there was an article in the paper, and I don't know the answer, but I want to make sure that we're not putting something on the record that later on turns out to be inaccurate, so we just take it through. Was there a time when there was somebody out on the pedestrian mall tap dancing that security stopped, and were they asking for money?
I don't know whether they're asking for money or not, to be honest with you.
So to answer your question, there may be times when somebody just went out there because they either wanted to express something, or to be blunt, wanted to pull a stunt just to see how the experience would react. Some people have gone out there and literally tested the boundaries of the prohibitions or lack thereof to see what would happen. And I don't have a doubt in my mind that some that are out there, probably most that are out there, aren't even aware of the litigation or the case law or anything else, and they're just going out there to make money. But I can also tell you that there are others that have gone out there that have been, for want of a better term, doing things just to see if they can generate a reaction from security or from Metro to see where the boundaries of enforcement lie. I don't have a doubt some of those people are put up by organizations that are interested in litigation. I don't have a doubt that some of those people were out there because they themselves may be interested in litigation. Some may just be ordinary citizens that are just curious as to how much freedom they enjoy in that pedestrian wall. I don't know the percentages of either, but I do know that some have been out there doing it for free just to see what happens.
Councilman, if my answer was too absolute, I apologize. I mean, the vast majority, almost without exception, folks are coming down there to conduct commerce. And so may there be some examples out there where they're out there doing something with other intentions, perhaps, but by far the vast majority are out there to make commerce.
The reason I ask is, Jeff testified that, it's his responsibility and the Fremont Street's responsibility to have organized commercial enterprises. So they have kiosks and people pay a certain amount, and that's all organized and thought well planned out. So if somebody goes down there and sets up their own commercial enterprise, such as standing there dressed in silver, asking for money, could that be banned as a commercial enterprise from Fremont Street Experience because they have the authority to organize that? That in and of itself, could that be completely prohibited anywhere on Fremont Street?
We've always thought so under the original ordinance. That's certainly the authority on the original pedestrian wall ordinance that was given to Fremont Street, as well as the development agreement. The development agreement charged them with operation and maintenance of the wall. And remember, when we go back in time to day one, we thought, as did the local district court judge who agreed with us at one time, that it was not a traditional public forum. It was complete ability to regulate all activity. So as it's been whittled away by various court decisions until we have the final decision, which threw virtually everything out, we have a contract which charges Fremont Street with total regulation and total control and total management, and a set of laws that doesn't mirror that. A set of laws that says you really can't go that far because it is a traditional public forum, and as a result, you're limited to the type of restrictions that you can impose. I would agree with you, Councilman, that purely commercial speech is completely controllable, even under First Amendment law, by the Fremont Street Experience.
It is.
Purely commercial speech. Well, when it comes to limits,
so why would you set up?
like
Why would you
billboards
set
and
up
stuff like
a-
that are commercial, but there's some First Amendment limits to that. There's various kinds of commercial speech that the courts have chipped out little exceptions for, but by and large, commercial conduct, setting up a kiosk of your own just to make money, hypothetically, would be completely prohibited by the Fremont Street Experience. Here's where we get into problems.
So why would you set up a free zone for that then?
We get into problems. There are, one, we want that commercial space in the wall to be prime commercial space reserved for Fremont Street to make money on and enhance the pedestrian and tourist experience. That's the reason for it. But there are times when, if this were just all black and white, this would be so easy. But we have, as I explained to somebody the other day, what if you went out on the wall and you set up a table and you started selling white Hanes t-shirts? Just white t-shirts. Purely commercial, no content, no speech, no nothing. I think that could be completely prohibited. But now I stamp a message on it. I stamp, I'm for Jesus, or screw the government, or I'm for John Edwards, or whatever you might want to put on this. Now you might have a message that gets looked at in addition to your plain white t-shirt. And because you have a hybrid, courts begin to look at this a little bit differently. And they begin to look at that kind of speech, maybe not just commercial, but having a free speech component to it as well. Entertainment. You want to talk about entertainment? Individuals who express themselves through stripping, courts have said. That may have a First Amendment component. There may be some communicative speech going on there. They get a tip for it, paid for it. There are lots of things that we look at today that just aren't as black and white as you would think. You might think that if you sell any kind of product, that's always commercial speech. Depends on the product. What if you sell crucifixes?
Okay,
What if you sell
so
rosaries?
what I'm hearing you saying is there is a possibility that you could ban commercial type speech, but I guess what I'm hearing you say is on a safe side, instead of banning it, is to move it to a free zone.
If you're asking for money, that's what we're looking at here. If If you're asking for anything of value for yourself or your business, and let me read the definition of solicitation as it's rewritten. The word immediately has been taken out of it. Solicitation means the act of solicitation, including asking, begging, soliciting, or pleading for the purposes of obtaining money, charity, business, or patronage, or gifts of items of value for oneself, another person, or organization. That, we're saying, is in the free expression zone only. Mall entertainment, whether it's protected by First Amendment or not, in the free expression zone only. That's it. Those are the two restrictions.
Whether you're asking for money or you're not asking for money,
Right, on the mall entertainment, whether you're asking for not, you're in there.
you're in the free. Okay.
That's correct.
But what I'm hearing you saying is if it's a commercial, if you're entertaining for money, if you wanted to ban that completely, you're kind of, it's not completely clear whether you could do that or not.
Let me see if I understand the question. If you are an entertainer just asking for money,
Yeah, if you're,
I think theoretically, I think you can ban all of that. If you are literally an entertainer, let's say you're Wayne Newton, you want to go put on a show on the Fremont Street Experience, you want to charge tickets for it. I think that could probably be banned.
okay. But with this ordinance, it would not be banned, it would just be moved to the free zone area.
The problem, like I say, is getting into which speech is allowed and which isn't. Now, you're going to hear, and you're going to hear from the ACLU in a moment, you're going to hear from others that may say very well, completely disagree with me, that all this entertainment is all expressive and is all allowed and is all part of speech. And I think that as you look at the case law on this stuff, it really evolves over time. You know, as we sat here writing these first round of ordinances, we looked at every word with respect and with a desire to comply that was written by the Ninth Circuit, and we still have disagreement among courts. So when it comes to entertainment, again, I really think the better way to look at this is that on paper, Fremont Street has the ability to regulate it, to limit it, and to pick only their own, and they get to pick and choose the entertainment. In reality, the courts may well say a lot of this is protected speech,
Okay.
and that's why, rather than argue whether it is or it isn't, whether it's real entertainment or commercial entertainment, or this or that, we're still call it entertainment,
That,
we put it this way.
that answers my question, thank you.
Is that it, Councilman? Okay. Mr. Derby, solicitation, the definition that you provided, would there be an issue if, in fact, one of the entertainers would be out on the mall entertaining and have a bucket in front of them, however they did not ask anyone for any currency?
Yeah. He may say, I'm not an entertainer, I'm a solicitor, and that's how I solicit. That's protected. And that's how you get around it. You say your solicitation is protected speech. But we're not going to separate that anymore. By saying entertainment, we don't care if you got a bucket or not. We don't care if you're soliciting or not. Because soliciting and mall entertainment are two categories that are going to be in the free expression zone. We're not going to get involved in making that decision anymore, whether you're looking for money or not, whether it's commercial or solicitation.
I understand that, but my pointed question is it solicitation if, in fact, an entertainer, whether it be in the zone or out of the zone, if an entertainer had a bucket in front of them and they did not ask any of those who are standing by observing them or being entertained, is that considered solicitation?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, and I think that's why the courts are going to say, too, you don't want to go there. Courts are really frowned on laws and activity that require any judgment by a human being at all, because human beings can pick and choose. You may walk out as a security guard and see a bucket and somebody tap dancing in front of it and go, boy, it's clear to me he's begging and pleading for money by the act of tap dancing. Somebody else can walk by and say, he didn't utter a single word. He's just tap dancing. There just happens to be a bucket there. You know, courts look at that and say, boy, you know, I don't like that because you get to pick and choose who is, you know, soliciting and who isn't. I have a card in my hand. We actually have the circuit look at this and say we don't like this written solicitation stuff because you have to read it to determine whether or not solicitation. They don't like the fact that somebody has to make a judgment call. How the heck else do you know unless you read it? But the courts don't like that, and I respect that. I don't have to agree with it, but I respect it, and we'll follow it. When you talk about some of these areas, you're really getting into those kinds of discussions. That's why one could stand here in front of you and say, this is all protected speech. This solicitation is protected. Expressive speech is protected. And speech doesn't have to be words. It can be conduct. And some of that is protected. And so you can have, depending on what you're talking about, my answer is only as good as the very specific example you give me. Wayne Newton going out in the middle of the mall selling show tickets for, whatever he would do on the strip, I think I'd have a pretty good argument that's purely commercial and you're probably not. Somebody else gets out there and starts tap dancing with a bucket in front of it with a dollar sign, doesn't utter a word, they might have a better argument that I'm soliciting as opposed to entertaining. That's just my method of driving you to my bucket. Or I put a religious shirt on now. Or I'm a devil worshiper and I want to get money from those folks. Or I'm part of the Aryan Brotherhood, or whatever you are. You bring a message and put a bucket in front of you, and you're not uttering a word.
Mr. Victor.
Again, we're starting to move all over the scale as we talk about this conduct.
I'm with you. I understand, Brad. Mr. Victor, are there any of your vendors hired by Fremont Street Experience or any of the properties that exist under the canopy that solicits or distribute any type of literature, leaflets?
If you're talking about entertainers that we hire that will also accept tips, yes, that's true. Do they distribute flyers or paraphernalia? I think some of the casinos would have timeshare operators in their doorways that may or may not distribute paper stuff. I'm not coming up with a concrete example of any of our vendors on Fremont Street doing that.
Okay. What about the other properties? Do the other properties, the casinos or the like, distribute flyers or go out and solicit beyond just the timeshares?
Oh, I think all the businesses up and down Fremont Street would be happy to do that if that's allowed.
But to your knowledge, do you know whether or not they do it today?
Oh, sure. In the last year, the floodgates have opened. And remember, not all the businesses up and down Fremont Street are member properties. And even within those member properties, there are third-party entities. Our ability to control those kinds of activities has been quite confused and diminished over the last year.
I have no further questions at this time. Thank you, Mr. Victor. Thank you, Mr. Jerby. If there's anyone here wishing to speak on this item, we would ask that you please come forward, state your name for the record.
Where would you like me to sit? Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Maggie McCletchie. I'm the staff attorney at the ACLU of Nevada. A few preliminary things is that I'd like to be sure that the copies of the things that were put into the record are made available to the public.
Absolutely.
Also-
As is, by the way, the PowerPoint. So you will know the entire PowerPoint and all the videos as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jervik. Another concern I had that touches on the open meeting law issue is the fact that the version of the ordinance that you have in front of you today, and it was made available to the public beforehand, is going to be slightly changed. And I'm not sure that necessarily you can act on something that hasn't been made available. That's a preliminary concern. More importantly, I was concerned when Mr. Jervik was speaking that he said that some of the issues about the full meaning of solicitation and how that's going to be applied, what is and isn't solicitation, may be worked out later. Under the law, the due process requirements that a law not be vague and ambiguous requires that members of the public, people who may be penalized under the law, are able to understand it. And if Mr. Jervik and Mr. Victor today were not clear on the meaning of the law, and yourself, Councilman, I'd actually put forth that it might not be possible for members of the public to, when the law the ordinance might be enacted for them to understand it. So those are just some preliminary concerns about the materials before us today. I also wanted to point out a few things about the testimony. A lot of it was based on hearsay. I realize Mr. Victor later corrected himself, but it's also not possible to testify to a negative, saying something that never happens. And I can actually tell you, it's also, again, hearsay, of course, but I can tell you that I'm aware of people going down to Fremont Street, including the ACLU, engaging in activity that is by no means commercial and that is unquestionably protected by the First Amendment. I'm just going to get into the history of the litigation and in the history of Fremont Street that Mr. Jerbick set forth. I don't really contest very much, but there are a few things that I want to set forth at the beginning, a few myths that I think may be perpetuated by some of the things we've heard today. First of all, I disagree with the underlying idea that you can't comply with the Constitution and make money. There are many places in the United States where we have vibrant commercial areas, vibrant downtown areas, where they don't have these kinds of laws that limit First Amendment activity, and businesses flourish. And it's part of, in fact, living in a vibrant area. In my opinion, a lot of the reasons that people like coming to Fremont Street and like coming to this area of town, as opposed to other areas of town, we see growing off the Fremont Street Experience area, we see growing businesses like a new coffee shop, a new art center, and I think a lot of the types of people that like coming to Fremont Street like coming here because it is more like an urban area, which include a traditionally urban area, which includes having the free speech activities that are common right now. In any case, arguing that speech is undesirable and interferes with commercial interests does not justify unconstitutional restrictions. I'm going to walk through a little bit later about why I think the restrictions are unconstitutional, but in any case, I just want to make clear that just because, even if it were true that it interferes with commercial interests, that does not justify unconstitutional restrictions. Another point is that Mr. Jerbick and the council and the law and Fremont Street Experience Limited Liability Corporation security guards can't decide what isn't legitimate First Amendment protected activity. You both had some interesting and important questions, I thought, about things like, well, if you have the jar of tips, is that commercial? If you're dressed up and you're trying to get people to give you money to take a picture, is that First Amendment, or is that or isn't that protected? And actually, the Ninth Circuit, I think, is obviously the binding authority on this point, and they have made clear that that kind of activity is protected. And it's actually irrelevant, they said, whether it's both protected to go after tips, to ask for tips, and to passively seek them. And we've heard a lot of things about, well, there's the balloon artists, things like that, hula hoops and things like that. Those are clearly not protected. Someone dressing up in silver and portraying a statue, that's not protected. That's not true. The Ninth Circuit, in striking down an actually much more permissive and protective street performer scheme in the city of Seattle, the lead plaintiff was a balloon artist. So a lot of the kinds of activities that I think today we may be assuming are on the gray area, or not in the gray area. When the Ninth Circuit says that an activity is protected under the Constitution, it is protected under the Constitution. Along with the, related to my last point, that just because we may not like what's going on down there, we may not like all the kind of speech that we see, we may disagree with it, that we have to figure out how to regulate it, how we're going to solve the problem. The Ninth Circuit in the Berger decision that I mentioned said the following: First Amendment protections are robust, yet at the same time fragile and precious. Often government restrictions on speech seem perfectly reasonable at first glance, and the encroachment on expression forgivable in pursuit of convenience or good manners. But 70 years of law, beginning with Hague v. CIO, has laid down the basic principle that there are a few government-owned areas of which public parks are the preeminent example in which values underlying the First Amendment favor communication among citizens over merely reasonable speech restrictions, and require instead that any regulation of speech be targeted at real problems and carefully calibrated to solve those problems. In other words, while some among them, the dissenters in this case, might prefer a Truman Show version of pristine placidity in our public parks, our First Amendment jurisprudence rests on a very different vision.
May I just stop you there?
Yes, sure.
Well, number one, it seemed like you're trying to rush through it. You don't have to rush. You can take your time.
We've just been here so long.
I know.
I'm assuming we're all ready to go eat lunch, but thank you for
But
that.
we want to make sure that you get everything that you need on the record as
Thank you
well.
very much. I
So,
appreciate that,
so you
Councilman.
don't have to, feel as though you're being pressured. You're not. So you can
I'm
take
also
your
from the
time.
East Coast, so I talk really fast. past.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to let you know that. And secondly, wanted to stop you for a moment just to ask a question in regards to the case study you just read in regards to public parks. And I know that Mr. Jervik defined whether or not the Fremont Street experience was a public park, was it a recreational venue, facility. So I want to ask a question in regards to the relevancy of one, Mr. Jervik, is in fact Fremont Street experience, according to case law, a public park, a recreational facility or entertainment venue, and in relation to McClutchy, Miss McClutchy case study is stating that she's referencing public parks. So I want to be able to see if in fact are they one and the same, or if in fact they're separate.
It's actually none of the above. It's a traditional public forum, according to the courts. The case law is that all streets and sidewalks are traditional public forum. And the argument that was advanced by the ACLU in the first round of litigation was that you did not successfully take this area that was street and sidewalk and convert it into a private, non-public forum.
Okay, but give me the short
Now,
version.
parts of public forums-
Is what is Fremont Street experience considered?
It's considered a public forum for purposes of what kinds of First Amendment activity are allowed and what kinds of restrictions and what tests will be applied to those restrictions. That's what's considered by the court. The word park, street, sidewalk is irrelevant when it comes to the big term. The big term is traditional public forum, which kicks in motion a test that says you have to have a substantial governmental interest in any regulation. It says that you have to leave alternative means of communication open if you do those regulations. And those regulations are limited to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions.
Okay.
That's-
Then I just want to hear
I think we're probably on the same
Miss
page on both of
McClutchy.
that.
We're on the same page about
Respond
the
to that.
public forum, and while
Okay.
this talks about public parks, the point is that they're both public forums. So
Okay.
the legal analysis from Berger is exactly directly applicable here. When you're talking about places like public parks and places like Fremont Street, when the Ninth Circuit declared that Fremont Street was indeed a public forum, as we had urged, what they said is it's the kind of area that is at the heart of the kind of public area where the public exchange of information is protected at the highest level of degree of protection by the courts.
Okay.
It is a public forum, just like what was at issue in Berger.
Thank you.
So moving along, again, I don't think we disagree on the basic parameters of whether it's public forum and what the law is, but I do want to reiterate, we heard a lot about the history of the Fremont Street Experience Limited Liability Company, the history of the development of the Fremont Street area, and a lot about the case law, and it is a very unique area, and I don't want to be dismissive of the fact that it is a different and unique area. However, the fact that it's unique doesn't change the constitutional analysis. As Mr. Jervik and I have agreed, it is in fact a public forum. We also agree, obviously, that the government can enact reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions despite the fact that it is a public forum. However, there are certain limitations on that. First of all, it has to be content neutral. And where you are allowing certain kinds of speech, Fremont Street Experience Limited Liability Company endorsed performances, and then relegating other kinds of performances to a very small area, arguably this is not content neutral. When something is not content neutral, it is presumed unconstitutional, and a very high test applies. In addition to being content neutral, there are other requirements. It also has to be narrowly tailored to serve significant government interest, and it may not burden more speech than necessary. This is almost a total ban. The actual area that's left, that's carved out, is so small that it almost operates like a total ban. And so it is not narrowly tailored to serve a significant governmental interest. In addition, we've heard a lot today about certain kinds of speech that we're concerned about, but this would reach a whole swath of activity. The total ban, for example, on solicitation would stop me from handing out my membership materials on Fremont Street unless I was in this very small area. In addition, the third requirement is that when you're enacting time, place, and manner restrictions, they have to leave open ample alternative channels, and you have to be able to reach your audience. This just doesn't pass muster. I read to you a quote from the Berger case. The Berger case, I can send this to Mr. Jervik and to yourselves after today, along with a memo detailing some of the issues that have come up today.
And as you mention these cases, will you be submitting those to the clerk, or are you just mentioning them on the record?
I'm just mentioning them. I can certainly, well, this has got my notes on it. I'm just mentioning them today. I will submit them. I will send you guys copies of these later. So
Okay, please make sure you send them to the
clerk as well. Sure.
so we can have that on the record.
I'm happy to do that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
In any case, the restrictions at Berger, they both required permits, and they also relegated street performers. It was about street performers, which I know is one of the big concerns here. They relegated them to certain kinds of areas. They tried to control who would perform where, when, to try to control some of the concerns. And it was struck down as unconstitutional. It didn't pass constitutional muster, and it was far more permissive than what we're looking at today. I listened with interest to the argument that this would be permissible because there are kiosks there and you can ban the solicitation within certain areas of the kiosks. I don't think that's correct. I don't think by putting up kiosks all over a public forum can you, in essence, justify a near total ban on speech. Another myth that I should have pointed out I wanted to discuss earlier is that these laws are necessarily needed to solve some of the problems. A lot of the problems we saw today in the videos are things that we wouldn't necessarily object to people addressing in a constitutional manner, and there may actually be laws on the books. For example, if that big, huge, I forget which group it was that was using it, but the big structure that was there, if you're actually obstructing traffic under county code, it's totally illegal. That is not something we object to. If you're actually obstructing traffic, that is something that is not permissible. We don't need to pass a huge ban on activities on the Fremont Street Experience area just to prevent that kind of problem. We've heard examples from Mr. Jervik about assault. Again, there's obviously assault laws on the books that we can go after if someone is truly is truly assaulting somebody. In terms of aggressive solicitation, we've never sued about aggressive solicitation, and we don't object to aggressive solicitation laws. And so, if somebody won't let you pass, if someone's engaging in that kind of activity, we certainly do at the ACLU do not object to those laws being enforced and those kinds of activities. While the speech can't be banned and it's very difficult to regulate speech under the law, you certainly can go after someone for aggressively soliciting. I also mentioned the obstruction of traffic. We've dealt with this issue on the Strip. You can't, for example, you asked me some questions about signs, and we litigated a case and eventually settled it regarding street preachers on the Las Vegas Strip, and they did have a law in the books that said signs couldn't be a certain size and you couldn't be in certain areas. And in the end, we came to an agreement where we just figured out a way to ban actual obstructing. So there's not a sign limit per se, but you cannot obstruct traffic on the Strip, and the same would be possible on Fremont Street. A few follow-up points. I wasn't here last time Mr. Lichtenstein was here, and he would have been here today because of the county dealing with the work card issue. But the Santa Monica ordinance, I understand that this law, these proposed ordinances were based in part on the Santa Monica ordinances. Those ordinances are nothing like what we have before us today. Like the Berger case, they're much more permissive. For example, they limit street performers from being within a certain distance of bus stops. But the vast majority of the area of the promenade and the pier area are actually open to free expression. In addition, the permitting scheme and the other restrictions at issue in Santa Monica, they haven't been reviewed by the courts. What has been reviewed by the courts, what is binding law, and a binding interpretation of the Constitution that the city of Las Vegas needs to consider is the Berger case, because that's I think the most direct case on point. Say the Fremont Street cases that we've litigated, it's the most direct case on point. Last time they discussed, I think some examples about airports were brought up. There were a few other examples today. I think about maybe a state fair. Those areas are not public fora, so the kinds of deference to speech that courts give are not given in those kinds of contexts. Airports are not a public forum, so it's much easier to regulate speech there, obviously. The final point I want to bring up is attorney's fees. I'm here before you today. Obviously, Mr. Jervik and I have some disagreements about the constitutionality of this law, and I understand that he's your attorney. But we've been before the City Council before on all of these issues, and we always try to come and testify and talk about issues before we litigate them. In the past, we've said that ordinances were unconstitutional. They've been passed anyway. Then we've gone to court, and then we've won. And then new ordinances have been proposed. We said, hey guys, we think they're unconstitutional. We're willing to work with you, but we don't think they're going to withstand constitutional scrutiny. The City Council passes them anyway. We go to court. Eventually, we win, and here we are again. This case, in some iteration, has been litigated for a decade and a half. Over $250,000 of attorney's fees have been paid out to the ACLU. I understand there's an argument that, hey, Fremont Street Experience and Limited Liability Company is paying those, the ACLU isn't paying those, so it doesn't really matter. It does matter, because if they can afford to just throw away money on legal costs and attorney's fees, then you guys should be charging them more in the lease. But more importantly, it's a waste of judicial resources, and, of course, the City Council shouldn't be doing things that violate the Constitution. I believe you take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and when something is unconstitutional, it shouldn't go onto the books just for us to litigate it, go to court, win and get attorney's fees, and then come back here. I mean, we've been around this block so many times that I really, really urge you to hold off on recommending this for action. I think we're always willing to sit down with Mr. Jervik and talk and try to figure out if there's other ways we can come to an agreement to resolve these concerns. In addition, we are actually in settlement negotiations right now with a United States magistrate judge who just contacted the parties, I think yesterday or the day before, to try to figure out when we could meet again. And we're negotiating in good faith there. We were actually pretty blindsided that this even came up because Fremont Street Experience, Limited Liability Company, the ACLU, and the city are all party to those negotiations. I actually can't discuss the contours of what we're talking about there because it's protected. But those are ongoing, and a judge has already expended significant time in trying to work this out between the parties. And so I just don't think that this is the right time for the City Council to just go and do its own thing over constitutional objections by the ACLU. Again, $250,000 of attorney's fees. You know, I enjoy coming here today and testifying in front of you. I also enjoy litigating. The only people who's interested in actually passing unconstitutional laws on some level is the ACLU, because we can go to court, win, and get attorney's fees. But rather than talk about this for another 15 years or another 30 years or another 100 years, I think the best thing for us to do is to actually come together and try to resolve people's concerns in a way that comports with the Constitution. I understand that the Fremont Street Experience area is a unique area. I understand that there are concerns about some things that go on down there. But the First Amendment applies, and we need to figure out a way to comply with the Constitution when we're trying to take care of things down there. Unless you have any questions, that's all I have.
I have a question.
Sure.
So from your standpoint, it would be constitutional for, let's say, 4 people to go down to Fremont Street Experience, set up a drum set, guitars, and start playing, and have a bucket and people throw money in it. That would be, as far as you're concerned, that's a First Amendment right for somebody to do that.
As far as I'm concerned, more importantly, as far as the Ninth Circuit is concerned.
So you're saying the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled that that is permissible activity?
They have ruled that street performers are protected under the First Amendment, and that both passive and active requests for tips are also protected. And I'm happy to share this. I'll be sure to send this around. But yes, that is my position, and that is the position of the Ninth Circuit. Street performers are protected.
But there's also the stipulation that there's time, place, and manner restrictions that could be put into place, correct?
That is correct.
That is correct. So putting them in a free speech zone as a that would be a place restriction, could be constitutional.
It could be. If it were content neutral, which it isn't, because some performers are allowed to go perform on the stage, and whenever you're picking between kinds of speech, it's necessarily not content neutral. And so because you're allowing some people to perform there and not others, arguably it's not even content neutral. So it's unconstitutional out of the gate. Second of all, you have to look at whether or not it's narrowly tailored and whether or not it leaves ample alternatives to for people to express themselves. And my argument is that that area is so small with respect to the Fremont Street area writ large that it wouldn't pass muster. In the law at issue in Seattle, in the Berger case that I keep talking about, there were kind of areas all throughout on the actual main areas. They weren't off into one relegated small area off to the side, and even that didn't pass constitutional muster. And so, yeah, I do not believe that passes muster because I think it's too small an area, and I don't think it passes the constitutional test.
Thank you. So, just to piggyback off of what the councilman just shared, if the area were larger, then what do you think the Ninth Circuit position would be if the area were larger?
Well, if the area were larger, arguably then the alternative channels of communication problem maybe that part of the test may be easier to pass. However, arguably it wouldn't be constitutional, and it would be subject to strict scrutiny because it's not content neutral, because you're allowing some speech and disallowing other speech. And so where you could have this kind of reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions always have to be content neutral. If they're not content neutral, they're not okay, no matter how big or small the area is.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. McFetchie?
Thank you very much. Very good that time.
All right. Is there anyone else here willing to speak on this item? If so, please come forward. State your name for the record. Mr. Jeremy?
If there's no one, I'd just like to, for one of them, have the final word. I don't want to say necessarily disagree with a lot of things that were represented by the ACLU. When you asked me the question about mall entertainment, you've got to read these cases. You've got to read the circumstances where the conduct occurred. You've got to read the type of conduct that occurred. There may well be a lot of conduct, as I said earlier, that because there's a crossover to solicitation or some kind of expressive activity that's given protection. When I look at Robot Man up here, he jumps off his pedestal and chases tourists away for taking his video. When you look at the KISS guys tasering somebody who disagrees with over a $20 tip, I think we're going to have some serious disagreements over what's protected there and what isn't. But I think that doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter if we don't have to parse. That's the beauty of this ordinance. You don't have to parse where you cross the line between protected entertainment and unprotected entertainment. Where you cross the line between protected solicitation and arguably, solicitation that might be limited in some way, unless it's coercive. It's all lumped into one category. We're just going to presume for a moment, that there maybe is some protection associated with some or all of the mall entertainment. We're treating it all alike, putting it all in the free expression zone, whether it has a solicitation component or not, because the solicitation goes in the free expression zone. As far as the size of the zones, there's no evidence that they're too small. If anything, I think the evidence is they may be bigger than necessary. But the fact of the matter is, I put it on the record, this is a little bit fluid. If it turns out that these zones aren't big enough for whatever reason, don't provide an alternate means of reaching or alternate means of communication, we'll look at them and they'll be expanded. We're going to monitor this and we're going to watch it. But I also want to say one thing about the First Amendment and the Constitution. I went to law school a long time ago, and what the law said the First Amendment to the Constitution was then is different what the law says and the First Amendment says now. It's the same First Amendment. It hasn't changed one bit in 230 years. The court's interpretation of it has changed. For the first 200 years of this country, you had loitering for purposes of solicitation was prohibited around the country. Solicitation and begging or panhandling, as they call it, it was prohibited. Courts changed their mind or looked at it in a different way, and the field of law began to evolve. And it's not only evolved at the Supreme Court level, it's evolved at the circuit level. You find some circuits view an ordinance like this completely different than maybe the Second Circuit, the Seventh Circuit, or another circuit. I don't think there's anybody who can wrap themselves in the American flag and say, this is the First Amendment, it's carved in stone, this is what it means today. Because most of this is developed as a result of these kinds of ordinances and this kind of litigation. And I don't think of all those people who have been upheld, that the ACLU was insecure when they lost. And I think of all those cities that lost, I don't think they were insecure when they thought they were taking their best shot at reading the law and what it said at that moment in time. That's just the reality of this kind of litigation. When you talk about winning some and losing some, of the taxpayers haven't paid a dime for the attorney's fees. The ACLU is correct, Fremont Street has picked it up. The taxpayers have picked up the cost of my salary for this presentation, Mr. Speed's salary for drafting these ordinances and the like. But that's been the cost to us, and that's going to continue to be the relationship as we get into probably the next round of litigation. But when you talk about where to draw the line, you know, we could say, hey, we won at the district court level ACLU in 1997. You throw in the towel. They say, oh no, we're going to appeal. We won now, you throw in the towel. We go back to district court, we win, you throw in the towel. We go back up there, you throw in, you. Where does this end? That's a silly argument. It's a silly argument for why you shouldn't litigate or not. Why you shouldn't promulgate an ordinance or not. You know, you have a responsibility that organizations that challenge this ordinance don't have. You have a responsibility to govern. You have the responsibility to look at the big picture. And there's tension between these things, and there always will be. It's just the nature of our country and our laws. But what I'm asking you today is to look at this ordinance from that perspective and ask yourself, is your responsibility as the governing body of the city of Las Vegas, is there a problem? If you don't think there is, toss this out now and tell it. If you think there is a problem, then ask yourself, is this the right, measured solution to that problem? And if you think it is, I ask that you pass it out with a due pass with the following amendments. One, Mr. C slipped me a note. He's a clever fellow who reads when I don't. Line 18, page 5 also has a reference to the word leafleting that needs to be stricken. Line 24, page 5, says leafleting and needs to be stricken, and the word and needs to be added to line 23. That will make it clear that leafleting is not restricted to these free expression zones. And finally,
18 and 24.
I'm sorry, line 18, page 5.
Gotcha, okay, yeah.
So the word leafleting, just toss that word out. And then on 24, take out that whole line 24 and add the word and after line 23. Mr. Steed has also suggested, and with your permission, I don't have the exact language, we would like to include some language in the ordinance that makes it clear that leafleting is permitted in the pedestrian law. Not just remove the prohibition, but add an express permissive section. And with that proposed First Amendment, I'd ask you to consider it as a pass or depass at this point.
Okay. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none. Councilman, open for discussion.
Good presentation. A lot more informed now. Thanks for coming down to your side. I did have, when I was walking in here, I did have a problem with the leafleting portion, because that, to me, that is, I mean, it is a public forum down there. So for somebody to have the ability to exercise their First Amendment right to go down to Fremont Street to pass out a Save the Whale leaflet, I think that's appropriate under the First Amendment. They should be doing that. So I'm glad you're taking that out. I'm also glad to hear that you're going to actually put it in there as permissive activity. I'd still like you to just make sure that the definition of leafleting is very clear to anybody who reads it. Okay?
Again, Councilman, another alternative is we could just take out that definition altogether since it's somewhat irrelevant now. I mean, there's two ways to go. Just take out the definition of leafleting, don't define the conduct, and as a matter of law, it's just permissive, or define it and take it out of the exceptions right now and put a sentence in saying this is leafleting, here's how it's defined, and it's perfectly allowed in law.
It seems
Either
to me,
way.
it seems to me it should be defined, because I mean, how are the police going to know if somebody's leafleting or not? You know, because ultimately it's going to have to be enforced. So I think that needs to be really defined. So when the cop or security shows up, that person's leafleting, that's okay. Leave them alone. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm glad to hear that, but what's different is the soliciting and mall entertainment, to me, is not so much speech, it's commercial activity. I mean, that's really what's happening down there. People are going down to Fremont Street, and they're soliciting and entertaining to make a buck. I mean, that's what's happening, and if you don't regulate that, there's going to be mass chaos down there. I mean, anybody's going to be able to do it, and I think the Fremont Street experience and the City of Las Vegas has a responsibility to decide who's going to set up a commercial enterprise down there and who doesn't set up a commercial enterprise. So,
And let me stop you there, Councilman, because we need to make the record real clear on this. I respect what you're saying, and I think that there is certainly a case to be made that, you know, a lot of people who solicit aren't doing it always for charity or something. It doesn't matter under the Constitution whether it's for charity or for themselves.
That's a good point.
It's just protected. And so I would urge you, rather than make a record that we're looking at commercial speech that we just think needs to be regulated, we need to look at the conduct itself and its effect on the mall and take it from that point of view. Does it interfere with pedestrian traffic? Does it interfere with commercial economic nature? Does it interfere with the aesthetics? Does it interfere with all those things the circuit said that we can? And if you feel it does that in spite of its being constitutionally protected, then I think we need to look at whether or not this is a reasonable time, place, and manner.
okay, well, I do think it causes problems down on Fremont Street experience, and I think this is it seems to me this is a good compromise. You're not completely banning that activity. You're allowing it to go into one particular area, and if somebody on Fremont Street wants to go over there and listen to them and participate in their entertainment and their soliciting, they're very free to do that. But I think if you don't regulate that activity, you can't have chaos down on people go down to Fremont Street for a particular experience, and you can't have mass chaos down there.
And
I think this helps.
Probably need to find the kind of chaos we're talking about too. It's chaos in the terms of literally shooing people away from businesses and the commercial opportunity. If it's chaos in the sense that they block pedestrian traffic, they detract from the aesthetics of the mall. If all that is what you intend by the definition of the word chaos, then I think that's appropriate. If it's just a matter of we don't like it or we find it distasteful, that's not something governments get to consider.
That's correct.
Councilor, you have a motion?
My motion will be to forward this to the entire city council
As amended?
as amended.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's with a do pass recommendation?
Yes.
Okay.
That is with a due pass recommendation. Thank you.
And thank you for the extraordinary amount of time you allowed us to build a record.
Thank you. At this point, we're down to citizens' participation. If there's anyone here wishing to speak under citizens' participation, please come forward to the microphone. State your name for the record. Seeing none, Councilman?
Motion adjourned.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you all. Too late.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay.
I'm with you.
No, we can-